I never saw it coming. One minute, we were a family, and the next she was gone, chasing a man she met at the library. She tore our lives apart, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a daughter to protect. But I didn't just sit back and let her walk away. I planned my revenge, cold and calculated. I took everything she thought she'd gain, including our daughter's love. Now she watches from the sidelines as I rebuild what she destroyed. This is my story, my vengeance, and it's far from over. Oh, wow! That was a day I'll never forget. It seemed like just a regular Saturday dinner. Young Rachel was there, staying with us for the weekend as usual. Let me tell you about Rachel being there. Rachel's mom, Andorra, was a widow who worked long hours at a taxi company almost every weekend. Rachel and my daughter Otterly had become best friends at school, so it became normal for them to have sleepovers. Soon Rachel was staying over at our house on Friday and Saturday nights, while her mom worked night shifts and rested during the day. Marge, my ex-wife and Otterly's mom, got to know Andorra pretty well. But to be honest, I had never met her. There wasn't a real reason for that. Maybe Marge thought Andorra was too lovely for me to meet. It just turned out that way. At that time, I was traveling a lot for work. The company was new, and we were trying hard to find our place in a market that was already taken by others. Marge would take care of dropping off and picking up Rachel, while we sometimes had taxis come to collect her on Sundays. Rachel loved when the taxi drivers came with sweets and ice creams. Even Otterly enjoyed it because she often got treats too. Anyway, back to that unforgettable Saturday dinner. There we were, the four of us at the table enjoying our meal. Marge had just served dessert, and I had just returned after putting away the main dishes. Suddenly, without any warning, Marge said, "Pete, I want a divorce. I'm leaving you." She said it so casually as if it was just another part of our meal. "Sorry," was all I managed to say. When your wife of 10 years says something like that out of the blue, you first wonder if you heard her right. "I want a divorce. I found someone else and want to be with him," she told me. I was at a loss for words, unsure how to respond to something so unexpected. I remembered that there were 2 young girls, one of whom was our daughter, sitting at the table with us, watching my every move and listening to my words. I think I handled the situation very well that day. Looking back, I am proud of how calm I stayed. For a long time, I replayed Marge's words in my mind until I truly believed that she was telling me she wanted me out of her life. I probably said something silly like, "If that's how you feel, I'll start looking for a new place tomorrow." At least, I think that's what I said. I was in shock, so my memory of that day might be a little unclear. But I did mention moving out, and then Marge hit me with a surprising response. "No, you'll need to keep the house. I won't need it, and you'll need it for Otterly." I stopped pretending to eat my melting ice cream and stared at Marge. "We're going on a trip around the world, and Otterly can't miss out on her school at her age," she said casually, not even glancing up. "You've got to be joking," I replied, louder than I meant to. I was trying to control my emotions, not for Marge's sake, but for those 2 young girls at the table. Marge probably decided to say this during dinner, knowing I would keep my cool around the children. "I want to see the world while I'm still young enough to enjoy it," Marjorie said, not recognizing the irony in her words. At that moment, I was at a loss for words, and if things weren't so serious, I might have laughed out loud. When Marge and I first got together, I was very excited about traveling. I'd always planned to travel the world for a few years after finishing my engineering training before settling down. When Marge came into my life, I thought that plan would stay the same. I imagined us backpacking together in beautiful places. But Marge had a slightly different idea. She also wanted to see the world, visiting places like the Grand Canyon, the Rocky Mountains, and those big redwood trees. We talked about Ayers Rock in Australia and the North Island of New Zealand, with its bubbling mud pools. A friend from New Zealand had told me about his skiing adventures on the South Island, which sounded exciting. More exotic than the Alps, anyway. But Marge's plan was a bit different from mine. I thought we would get married and set off on our travels once I finished my studies, with the savings we had managed to put away. I had imagined that after a few years of traveling, we would come back to the UK, settle down, and have some kids. Of course, that was assuming we didn't find a place we liked better while we were away. Marge wanted to have kids first. She had said, "While I'm young enough to enjoy them." At the time, I thought I understood her reasons. Her parents were older when her mother had her, and I could see that it had affected her. Marge figured that once the kids were grown, we would travel the world together. But it seemed like she changed her mind. Taking care of Otterly might not have been as fun as she expected. I knew she didn't enjoy her pregnancy or the birth. After Otterly was born, the idea of having 3 children quickly vanished from her plans without much discussion, as far as I could tell. That was the moment I almost lost it. But I couldn't laugh about it. Looking back now, maybe I should have. I couldn't stay at the table listening to Marge any longer. I felt like I would do something I'd regret later. So I got up and went out to the garden. For some reason, maybe just out of habit, I began trimming the dead flowers from my roses. I don't know how long I was out there before I realized I had company. I first noticed Rachel next to me, trimming the bush beside mine. Then I saw Otterly working on the other side. Neither of them said a word when they came over. "Be careful of the thorns, girls. You don't have your gardening gloves on," I warned without thinking. "We'll be careful, Daddy," Otterly replied. "What's your mother doing?" I asked, almost forgetting why I was angry. It felt like a question I had to ask. "I think she's upstairs packing," Otterly said quietly, as if this was just normal. Suddenly, I felt a wave of anger again, and I couldn't focus on the roses anymore. I was afraid I would pull too many flowers off if I kept going. I stepped back and watched the girls continue their work. Honestly, I wanted to go upstairs and confront Marge. I was not just upset about her decision to leave me without warning. I was more hurt by the fact that she had told our daughter she didn't want Otterly to go with her. I couldn't understand how any mother, especially my wife, could act like this towards her child. "I'm sorry, Otterly," I found myself saying without giving any explanation. "Why, Daddy? You're not going to leave us too, like Mummy?" my daughter replied, clearly picking up on my worry. "Most of the kids at school have daddies who are gone. I'd rather have a daddy who loves me than a mother who—" Otterly didn't finish her thought, and I still wonder what she meant. Did Marjorie somehow make Otterly feel unloved? I hadn't noticed anything like that. To me, Marge was always a caring mother to both Otterly and Rachel when she visited. But if I missed the signs that my wife was seeing someone else, I worried about what else went unnoticed. Maybe Otterly believed that Marjorie didn't love her just because she wasn't taking her along. I suddenly saw the 2 girls working together on a rose bush, holding hands. One was pulling off the dead flowers, while the other put them in a basket. Then I heard Marjorie talking on the phone in the bedroom. The windows were open because it was warm outside. I couldn't catch what she was saying, but I realized the girls might hear her better than I could. "Ice cream!" I called out. "Come on, girls! Let's go get the biggest ice creams we can find." I knew they had just eaten ice cream for dessert, while mine had melted as I pushed it around my bowl. But it felt like the best idea I could come up with in that moment. Both girls cheered and quickly forgot about the roses, giving each other high fives, something I hadn't seen them do before. I walked to the car with an 8-year-old on each side, each holding my hand. To make it special, I didn't take them to a fast food place. We didn't have a real ice cream shop nearby. Instead, I chose a nice restaurant in town and ordered their amazing sundae. I thought they might not finish it, but I was very wrong. It took them a while to eat, which gave me some time to process Marjorie's surprising news and try to understand what was happening to us. I needed to think about what this situation meant for me now and in the future. For some reason, I didn't feel too upset that Marjorie was leaving. Sure, I would miss her, but any feelings I had for her vanished when she made her announcement in front of Otterly. There was a big issue that her leaving would cause me: childcare. I could take care of Otterly, but I needed someone to take her to and from school every day. I knew my job would try to help, but our hours were from 9 to 5, while school was from 9 to 3. Plus, who would look after Otterly during school breaks? Rachel? I felt bad for her, but I had my own challenges, and her mother needed to figure things out on her own. I thought I should call her later to explain everything. The only idea I had was my sister Carol. She lived quite far away, but perhaps she could pick up Otterly from school in the afternoons, even if it meant a long drive. The only issue was that Carol's kids might finish school around the same time as Otterly. I pulled out my phone and called Carol, hoping she might have a solution. Carol was always good at coming up with ideas. She did what? Carol raised her voice as I briefly explained Marjorie's news without sharing too many details since the girls were with me. I realized I hadn't learned much about Marjorie's situation. I didn't know how long it had been happening or with whom. Carol, I said that Marge left us for someone. Who? Someone special? Carol pressed. I have no idea, just some guy she met, I guess. I didn't ask. His name is Ronald, Otterly piped up, surprising me. He's a customer at the library, Rachel chimed in, eager to share. It turned out Marjorie had been doing some part-time work at the library to earn a little extra money and have a break, or so she said. I looked at the two girls, who were happily enjoying their big ice cream sundaes, while I repeated what they had said to Carol. But my problem is, Carol, I don't know how I'm going to pick up Otterly from school every day. I can drop her off in the mornings and get into the office a little late, but there's no way I can leave early every day. That's okay, Daddy, Otterly reassured me. Rachel's mom will pick me up from school, Otterly said confidently. Before Carol could reply, I tried to explain. It wouldn't be fair to ask her to do that every day, Otterly. Oh, it won't be a problem, Otterly assured me. We've already figured it out. Right, Rachel? Rachel looked up from her ice cream, nodded, and smiled at me, letting me know that the two of them had been planning this together quietly. I couldn't understand when they found the time to do that. Rachel will stay over at our house on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, Otterly said. And I'll stay with Rachel and her mom on the other school nights. You can drop us off on Mondays, and Rachel's mom will pick us up in the afternoon. Otterly had that satisfied look that kids get when they solve a problem easily. I wasn't sure how to respond. I was a bit surprised by everything I had just heard. Carol must have caught Otterly's idea because she said, "That sounds like a great plan to me, Pete. Have you talked to her?" Well, no, Carol, I didn't think about it. I've never met Rachel's mom, so I'm not sure if she would agree. It's asking a lot. The taxi driver has been asking my mom to work on Sunday nights for a while, Rachel added. She said she would earn more money at the taxi company than at the shop, but she didn't want to ask Otterly's mom to watch me. I gathered from Rachel's words that her mom must have been working part-time at a store during the week. It seemed like she was working hard all the time. It sounds like the kids have found a solution, Carol commented. What is Otterly's friend's mom like? I have no idea. I've never met her, I admitted, making sure to watch what I said, knowing the two girls were listening intently. You should probably go and talk to Rachel's mom soon and see what she thinks about their idea, Carol suggested. Then turning back to the other topic, she asked, Has Marjorie already moved out? I don't know, Carol. The girls and I are at a restaurant in town. I took them out for some ice cream before heading back, but I think she was packing when we left. I think you should pick up some new locks while you're out. You don't want her coming back. Call me later if you need help tonight, or Frank and I can come over if you'd like. Andorra looked lovely, her simple but elegant makeup enhancing her features. Her hair was perfectly in place. She could easily be mistaken for a model on a runway, moving with grace. I understood why all the drivers had taken an interest in her and why they lingered around the taxi office. Andorra, there's a man here who wants to speak to you, said the man at the counter. Hi, Pete, is everything okay? She asked with a cheerful smile, though her tone had a touch of concern. Well, sort of, I responded, feeling anxious as I glanced around at the men who seemed to be pretending not to listen. Rachel is fine, and there's nothing to worry about. I just thought you should know what's happening. Can we talk somewhere private? As soon as I asked, all the men stood up as if they were going outside to leave us alone. But Andorra told them to stay put and that we would step outside. What's wrong, Peter? You look a bit troubled, she said once the door closed behind us. Then she noticed some girls with their faces pressed against the car window and waved to them. The thing is, Andorra, Marjorie has left me, I blurted out. It felt odd talking to someone I had just met and calling her by name. I was surprised she recognized me since I thought we had never met before. Oh no, you poor thing, was her first response. Then she seemed to grasp the situation. Does this mean we have a child care issue tonight? No, Andorra, I said, still getting used to the name. I just thought you should know that I'll be looking after the children by myself tonight. I thought it was right to inform you since we hardly know each other. That's not entirely true, Peter. Rachel talks about you all the time. She thinks of you as a substitute father. She even has a picture of you next to one of my husband's by her bed." "Really? Where did she get that?" I asked, surprised. "I believe Otterly gave it to her. Anyway, do you want me to take the girls tonight? I can make arrangements if you want some time alone." "Oh, no, that's not necessary. I just wanted to keep you informed. I'd be in a tough spot if they hadn't been with me this afternoon. I'm okay looking after Rachel. I just thought you should be aware." "I'm sure Rachel is in great hands with you, Peter," she said, reaching out to take my hand to reassure me. "I'll pick up Rachel in the morning. You should get some rest. 5 o'clock as usual is perfect. But maybe you could come by yourself because we really need to talk about the future. If you want, I can bring Rachel home." "Oh, yes, the future. I wasn't thinking," Andorra replied, looking even more worried. She must have realized what Marjorie leaving me could mean. "Don't worry. I think together we can come up with a plan. The girls already have a lot of ideas," I said, trying to smile. Andorra seemed a bit relieved. "Okay, but I'll go get Rachel. I'm sure you have plenty to focus on." "Thanks, I do. If I can just wrap my head around everything. I'll see you tomorrow evening. And please don't worry about Rachel. She's a great young lady." "Aren't they both?" Andorra said as we walked to the car. She shared a few words with the girls, said goodnight, and reminded them to behave. When we got home, there was another car parked in my driveway. Marjorie climbed out and came over as I stopped the car. "Where have you been? I've been waiting here for ages," she said sharply. Then she told us she was leaving. Even after what she'd told me earlier, I didn't recognize this person as the woman I had been married to for so long. "If that's who I think it is, you should tell him to move his car before I do it myself," I shot back. I felt really annoyed that Marjorie had him there when we returned. It felt like she was flaunting it. Looking back, I think I kept my emotions in check that day, mainly because the kids were present. But it seemed like Marjorie was trying to get a reaction from me. Maybe she thought it would help her justify what she was doing. Marjorie waved her arm, and the car roared to life, pulling out of the driveway and parking across the street. Ignoring her complaints, I shifted my car back into gear and maneuvered to reverse into the space where her car had been. She yelled that I almost hit her as I got out. "Oh, you're still here. I thought you had left," I said, walking towards the front door. Then I stopped and turned to look at her. "Aren't you taking that?" I asked, pointing at her usual car, which was empty, while the other one was full of her things. "No point. You might as well sell it. We're leaving the country on Wednesday," she replied. "Where to?" "Where should I have my lawyer send the divorce papers?" I asked loudly, but Marge was already ahead of me. "The address of Ronnie's lawyer is on the kitchen table. He'll know how to reach us," she said quickly. Then she turned to talk to Otterly, who, along with Rachel, had also gotten out of the car by that time. I didn't stay to listen to their conversation, and my daughter and I have never mentioned it since. It couldn't have been much, because both girls came inside with me just moments later and shut the door firmly. What I didn't see, but heard somewhere in my mind, was the loud slap of their hands as they cheered each other. At that moment, I didn't think much of the sound. We all settled on the couch to watch TV for a while until I decided it was time for the girls to go to bed. They both gave me a quick kiss on the cheek before heading upstairs without a fuss, which was a first for Otterly, as I remembered. I'm not sure what time I finally went to sleep, but I did have a couple of drinks to help me unwind that night. I woke up Sunday morning to the usual smell of bacon cooking in the house. For a brief moment, I forgot that Marjorie was gone and wondered why she was up so early on a Sunday. Then all the memories from the day before came rushing back, and I looked around the room. Something felt off or different, but for a moment, I couldn't figure out what it was. Then I noticed that when I'd gone to bed, there had been signs that Marjorie was there, drawers slightly open and wardrobe doors not quite closed. Now, everything was shut, and there were no signs of Marjorie anywhere. Even the pictures of her parents that I remembered on the dresser were gone. I got out of bed and went to the bathroom for my usual morning routine, only to find that Marjorie's things were also missing from there. I realized I must have had some visitors while I slept, and I could only think of 2 possible people who could have done this. "Come on, Daddy, breakfast is getting cold," I heard Otterly call from the stairs as I stepped out of my room. In the kitchen, I saw both 8-year-olds waiting for me. They insisted I sit down while they served me. I enjoyed a hearty breakfast with fresh orange juice and coffee, presented like I was dining in a fancy hotel. The two girls had chosen cornflakes, orange juice, and tea for breakfast. I shared some cheerful words about how nice the breakfast was and how skilled the cooks were, which made both girls smile widely. Just as we were finishing our meal, Carol, her husband Frank, and their kids arrived. Their entrance brought a slight change to the peaceful atmosphere. It seemed like they had expected Carol and Frank because Otterly and Rachel quickly offered them mugs of coffee. I had to gently persuade the girls to let me handle the cleaning up while they went outside to play with Carol's children. Actually, it was Carol who ended up doing the washing up while Frank and I enjoyed more coffee, and I shared the story of the day before. My sister and her husband said they would help out in any way they could. Frank even provided the name of a lawyer who had helped his sister with her divorce, and she turned out to be a great choice. Carol prepared dinner for everyone using what she found in the freezer and fridge. I spent most of the day tending to my roses whenever I wasn't chatting with Carol and Frank. One thing I remember from that day is that during the afternoon, Rachel and Otterly helped me take care of my roses, and Rachel mentioned a line from a song, "It's been a good year for the roses." I doubt she understood how the song related to the feelings from the day before, but I certainly did. I'm not sure how I reacted when Rachel said that. Still, I know she has brought it up often over the years. The girls seem to enjoy the song, and we often hear them playing or singing it, especially when someone mentions Marjorie. Around 4:30, a taxi pulled up, and Andorra got out. The girls welcomed her inside, and we made introductions. Then Carol, Andorra, and I moved to the lounge while Frank took all the children out to the garden to keep them busy. Andorra sympathized with me about what had happened. But before I could say much, Carol told Andorra about the girls' plan for looking after the kids. Andorra mentioned that she had casually talked to Rachel about working the Sunday night shift for the cab company. She told us she could earn more money this way than from working 4 mornings at her job in the local shop. Without much discussion, we decided to go along with the plan the children had shared with me the night before. There was some talk about Carol helping take care of both girls a couple of days a week during the school holidays. Andorra called the taxi company boss to check if she could take on an extra shift. He seemed really happy about it and asked her to start that night. For some reason, she looked to me for approval, and I just smiled and nodded, so she agreed. It was a bit tricky because Rachel needed her school clothes for the next day, so Carol drove Andorra and Rachel home to get them, and Otterly insisted on tagging along. As I carried Rachel's bag into the house from Carol and Frank's car, a thought popped into my head. "Andorra, do you drive?" I asked. "Yes, but I haven't been able to afford a car since Tony left," she replied. "How would you feel about a little Micra to use?" I found myself asking. Andorra stopped and looked at Marjorie's car parked in the driveway. "I couldn't," she said. "Why not? She doesn't want it anymore and asked me to get rid of it. You could definitely use it since you're taking Otterly to school every day." "Are you sure?" she asked. "Come on," I insisted. "Let's call the insurance company and get you added as a driver. We can take Marjorie off the policy since Ronald can handle her insurance from now on." "His name's Ronald, Daddy," Otterly corrected me. "Who cares what his name is? He's Roland the Rat to me," I replied a bit too sharply. "He can't be, Daddy. Roland the Rat is funny and nice," she said. I couldn't really argue with her logic, so I adjusted my words. "Okay, if you insist, it's Ronald the Rat," I grinned at her. For those who might not know, Roland the Rat was a puppet character on a popular morning TV show. In the weeks that followed, we all got used to the new routine. Carol, often with Frank and the kids, would usually show up on Saturday mornings to check on what we needed in the pantry and suggest what to buy. Most of the time, she'd also cook lunch for us unless we went out to eat. And yes, Carol never really wore white gloves, but she would inspect everything while she was at the house. Housework wasn't my best skill, but I quickly found I had little else to do in the evenings without Otterly there. I usually did little things around the house often enough that it looked good most of the time. Carol never seemed to find much wrong anyway. I found weeknights to be lonely at first, but I got used to it after a while. Fridays were wonderful, though, when I came home from work and found Andorra and the girls there. Andorra quickly took to preparing dinner for us before she went to start her Friday evening job. The harder times were during the weekdays. especially when I returned home from work to an empty house and woke up alone in the morning. No matter how I felt about Marjorie for her decisions, waking up alone in bed every day after so many years of marriage was challenging. It just took time to adjust. The divorce became a bit tricky. Marjorie and her new partner had left the country and were traveling a lot. I learned that Marjorie's lawyer was having a tough time reaching her, and it seemed like her partner was making things harder on purpose. Eventually, I found out that her partner had a very upset wife looking for child support. I met her once when our lawyers got together to discuss things. To be honest, I had my own problems to focus on and didn't want to get involved in hers. I know she eventually managed to freeze all of his UK bank accounts and got his British assets in the end. Without getting involved too much, I did what I could by telling her lawyer where Marjorie was when she called home to speak to our daughter. The credit for that should really go to Otterly, though. She had a knack for getting Marjorie to share her location when she called. Then she would tell me the news right away. I'm not sure if Otterly knew why I wanted the information or not. Strangely, the trouble Marjorie's lawyer had getting in touch with her worked in my favor. After another court meeting where Marjorie's lawyer asked the judge for more time because he hadn't heard back from her, the judge got frustrated. He wanted to know where Marjorie was, and the poor lawyer had to admit he had no idea. The judge turned to me and asked if I knew where she was. "I'm sorry, sir," I said as I stood, "but I have not spoken to my wife since she chose to leave our daughter and me." I tried to point out her absence, and technically, since we hadn't talked in person since she left, I was telling the truth. I may have forgotten to mention that Marjorie called Otterly every 3 weeks or so. But that wasn't what the judge asked, was it? You know how some people really like to push others for answers without any extra details. I wasn't sure what was going on, but maybe the judge had a tough day. Perhaps he was dealing with a challenging case, and it made him a bit short-tempered. Suddenly, I heard him say something about unreasonable behavior as a reason for ending a marriage. He explained briefly that Marjorie had not been in touch with her lawyer, which could be seen as a problem. Then he mentioned that I might also have a reason to seek a divorce based on Marjorie being absent from our lives. But in any case, he was ready to grant my divorce right away and give me full custody of our child, Otterly. The judge made a point, saying that shared custody wouldn't be fair if Marjorie couldn't even communicate well with her own lawyer. He looked at me directly and said, "Mr. Thomas, you will have full and exclusive custody of Otterly starting today. I'm also cutting off any claims Marjorie has on parenting rights, but with one condition." Turning back to Marjorie's lawyer, he continued, "If Marjorie comes to see me in the next 21 days, I might think about changing my mind. Can you make sure to let her know?" Marjorie's lawyer nodded timidly, saying he would try to inform her. The judge raised his eyebrows as he turned back to me. "Well, Mr. Thomas, I don't expect that will happen, and even if it did, I probably wouldn't change my decision. I'm surprised you haven't asked for any support payments for Otterly from your wife," he said. "I don't think I'd have much luck getting it, Your Honor, unless Marjorie comes back," I replied. The judge leaned forward and whispered to his clerk before shuffling through some papers on his desk. "We will set a temporary order for £100 a month. This amount is just for record-keeping. Like you, I doubt you will see that money. However, if Marjorie returns to this court's area, we can adjust the amount later. You should check to see if Marjorie has any property or money left in the UK." That was it. I left the courtroom feeling a sense of relief, keeping all the shared belongings from our marriage and the potential for more if we could figure it out. I never gave it much thought. Looking at my call log at home the next Monday, I saw that there had been an international call the day before. I must have missed it while I was outside working in the yard. The call had to be from Marjorie. She was the only person who called me from abroad. What puzzled me was that neither Otterly nor Rachel had mentioned the call to me, nor had they shared Marjorie's whereabouts as they usually did. You can think what you want about their silence, but I have my thoughts. Since Otterly hadn't been in court that week, I tried not to bring up the divorce with her, but I was curious about how the girls knew the time frame involved. I doubted the social worker assigned to help Otterly would have shared any details. As time went on, Marjorie's calls to Otterly became less frequent. I wasn't surprised. From the few calls I overheard, it seemed like the conversations were mostly one-sided. My daughter occasionally asked about Marjorie's whereabouts, but those questions stopped once her boyfriend's situation had resolved. I have no idea how Otterly or Rachel found out about his situation. I figured that since they lived nearby, his children probably went to the same school as my girls. Maybe all the kids shared information together. But if they did, the girls never talked about it with me. I guess the same could explain how the girls learned about Marjorie's announcement when she moved out. Sometimes adults underestimate how much kids understand about what's happening around them. I can't remember exactly, but it seemed like the divorce had been official for about 4 months. One Saturday afternoon, I took Otterly and Rachel to the movies. We were enjoying hamburgers at the local fast food place when Rachel told me that she and her mom would be moving soon. I asked why, and Rachel explained that their lease was about to end, and her mom thought the landlord was going to raise the rent too much. At the time, I didn't see what was really happening or realize that there was another plan in motion. After all, they were just 2 9-year-old girls. It was expected that they would try to get a treat or two out of me, or maybe even a fun day out. The idea that they had to come up with a clever way to invite Andorra and Rachel to move in with us was something I had never thought about before. They set it up on Friday evening while we were all having dinner. Andorra had made a nice meal before leaving for her shift at the office. Otterly, without a hint of mischief, asked Andorra if she had found a good place to live yet. Before Andorra could respond, Rachel started sharing stories about the flats they had looked at. Andorra tried to say those places weren't as bad as Rachel described. Somehow, I didn't realize that if Rachel had seen those flats, then Otterly had too, since the 2 girls were always together when one of us, either Andorra or I, was looking after them. Then Otterly made a comment that I should have seen coming from a mile away. "Dad, we have a spare guest room upstairs," Otterly pointed out. "Why don't Rachel and Aunt Andorra move in here with us? Rachel already sleeps in my room sometimes, and it would save us from moving around a lot." I thought about it and realized Otterly's idea wasn't bad at all. It would mean less travel for Andorra, and she wouldn't have to pay rent for her flat anymore. I looked at Andorra, hoping for some guidance, but she didn't meet my gaze. I felt awkward. If I turned down the suggestion right away, Andorra might get upset. But if I asked her directly, I could make her uncomfortable. I decided to take a safer route and be a bit vague. "Well, sweetheart, you know, sometimes it can be tricky when a man and woman who aren't married live together. Some people might misunderstand," I said hesitantly. To my surprise, Andorra laughed. "Come on, Pete, you sound so old-fashioned." "I'm not, Andorra. I was just thinking about how people might see us." "My reputation? You're joking. Want to know why we're leaving our flat? It's because I go out every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, and now, instead of being driven home by a taxi, I'm driving around in a new car. I don't get it. The Nissan isn't new. It seems new compared to some of my neighbors' cars. They think I can only afford it because of my weekend activities." Andorra waited for me to understand, a playful look on her face. "You're serious?" I exclaimed. "Yep, they even wrote to my landlord. I've told everyone that I work for the taxi company. I've even talked to some of them when they've called for a ride, but the rumors just keep going." "Oh my gosh, the sooner you move out of there, the better," my friend said. "I agree, but finding a good place I can afford isn't as easy as it seems," I replied. "Well, what about Otterly's idea? There's plenty of space here." "Are you sure? You didn't sound too excited about it." "Yes, I am sure. This house feels empty without the girls around, and besides, you're not as bad a cook as I am." "Should I take that as a compliment?" "Considering my cooking, yes. The room is available if you want it, Andorra, and I can see the kids can't wait." I pointed at the 2 smiling faces of the children. "We'll have to talk about rent," Andorra said. "No, I don't think we will. I'm not a fan of cleaning up, and I've already said you cook better than I do. How about you help out here as a cook and take care of the house?" "I'd do that anyway, but I should pay something. At least for heating, electricity, and taxes," Andorra insisted. "Let's worry about that later. Right now, I need to know if you really want to move in here. If you're inviting us, then yes, we'd love to." "Great. So it's settled. When do you want to move in? Oh, by the way, this place is furnished." "Oh, don't worry. Most of my things aren't worth keeping. A lot can be tossed. I sold the good stuff years ago after Tony left when I needed money." "Oh, what happened?" I asked. But Andorra's look told me she would share the details when the children weren't there. After being married to Marjorie for so long, I knew that look well. I knew that Andora's husband had died in a car accident years ago, but I didn't know the full story. Later, as we walked Andorra to her car, I heard a distinct noise behind me. I turned around to see Otterly and Rachel standing there, looking innocent. The girls moved in the next week. Andora's old furniture got mostly tossed, but some pieces ended up in the house. Other things were stored in the back of the garage. Her TV and music system went into the girls' bedroom. The house suddenly felt like a home again. Even my co-workers noticed I seemed happier. They mentioned that I didn't join them for drinks after work as much. But I had 2 daughters to get home to read bedtime stories to every night. My days of traveling had nearly ended when Marge left. Not sure how everything would turn out, I decided to take a stand, and my boss agreed to send some other guys instead of me. I just stopped volunteering to travel whenever I could. It wasn't long after Andorra moved in that I started to develop feelings for her, although I thought I was doing a good job hiding it at the time. What did anyone expect? Andorra was definitely attractive by anyone's standards. She was probably a year younger than me and always looked great, no matter what she wore. Andorra had a wonderful sense of humor and never seemed to get upset, whether it was with the girls or with me. She seemed to overlook my quirks, and I never claimed to be easy to live with. Honestly, I had been taken with Andorra from the moment I first saw her, so it wasn't surprising. I think Carol was the first to notice that I was smitten that Christmas. She and Frank brought their family over for Boxing Day, and Andorra was busy cooking dinner. "Have you told her yet?" Carol asked as we set the table together. "Told who what?" I replied. "Andorra, of course." "Sorry, you've lost me. What am I supposed to tell her?" "That you have feelings for her, silly," Carol said. "Come on, don't be ridiculous, Carol." "Oh, please, Pete, I can see it clearly. You're more into Andorra than you ever were with Stephanie Mathers." I better explain who Stephanie Mathers is. She was my first crush back in school. A friend of Carol's, I admired her for a long time before I finally got the courage to ask her out. She kept me hanging for a bit and then broke my heart when she decided to move on. After that, Stephanie was instantly not welcome with my sister and her friends, who helped me get over her in no time. Of course, I've become fond of Andorra. She's a lovely person, Carol. But I'm in a tricky situation here. Things are working fine as they are. If I do something to shake things up, things could get complicated. Peter, she feels the same way about you. You two act like you're really connected. What are you talking about, Carol? Pete, whenever you go from one side of the room to the other, you both seem to take the long way just to avoid even the slightest interaction. So we just want to respect each other's space. That's not it. There are only 2 reasons why 2 people living together act the way they do. Either they don't get along, which I doubt because I've never heard them argue, or they have feelings for each other. And don't try to deny it. You don't share any lighthearted banter like people often do. That's unusual for 2 people who spend so much time together. Just think about the jokes you share with your colleagues at work. No, both of you seem too concerned about maintaining the friendship. Do you think Andorra likes me? Oh my, Pete, she acts just like you do. The 2 of you are in sync. Even the girls can see it. So what should I do? I'm not sure, Peter. Maybe just express how you feel. Come on. She's not the first person you've impressed with your words. You used to be good at talking to people before you got involved with Marjorie. You never liked Marjorie, did you? No, I never trusted her. I felt like she had you under her influence. It reminds me of how Otterly and Rachel behave now, but I doubt you will notice that. The difference is, those girls truly care for you, which I never thought Marjorie did. Oh, you're wrong, Carol. Marjorie cared about me when we were married. Believe what you want, Pete. You saw care, but I saw someone who benefited from your success. You were doing really well at your job, bringing home a good salary. Frank wasn't earning half of what you were when I married him. I've always thought Marjorie saw you as a stepping stone. No, you must be mistaken, Carol. Whatever you believe, it doesn't matter now. Peter, someone has given you a new chance at happiness. There's a woman in the kitchen who I believe has genuine feelings for you. You just need to find a way to start a conversation. Before we could discuss it more, we heard Andorra coming in to check on the meal preparations, so Carol and I quickly changed the topic. During dinner, Carol kept glancing at me and subtly nodding her head towards Andorra. She also seemed to share a private joke with Otterly and Rachel, but I don't think anyone else noticed. Over the next few days, I almost brought it up with Andorra a couple of times, but I always backed out at the last moment. New Year's Eve arrived and Andorra was busy working. Carol and Frank had taken the girls so I could go to a party with friends from the office. I didn't want to leave the girls, but everyone insisted. This was not a conspiracy. There were just too many unrelated people involved. What happened that night must have just been a coincidence. It was about 4 in the morning and the party was coming to an end. Most people who were going home had already left, and those who stayed had found a place to rest. I couldn't find a good spot to relax, and I had drunk too much to even think about driving home safely. So I decided to call a cab. "Hi, can you send one of your drivers to take me home?" I said to Andorra when she answered the phone at the taxi office. "Are you okay, Pete?" Andorra asked. You could say that. I wasn't sure which phone to use. "I'll send someone over in 5 minutes. Thanks." "Oh, Pete." "Yes?" "Try not to make a mess in the back seat. Have you ever seen me like that?" "I've never seen you drunk. I really don't know what to expect." "You might be surprised." "I probably would. Phil's on his way, so please don't mess up his car. We already have enough of the guys trying to clean up." "Don't worry, I'll be good." "If only you meant that." "What do you mean?" "Never mind. Phil's outside now. Why don't you find your way to his car?" Andorra laughed, and then the call ended. "Wow, Pete, you really had a lot to drink," Phil, the driver, said as he helped me into the back seat of his cab. As he started driving, I noticed he wasn't taking me home. "You're going the wrong way," I tried to say, but it probably came out a bit jumbled. "You'll need someone to help you, and I'm not going to do that. I think I know who will, though. It's pretty quiet now, so one of the guys can handle things for the rest of the night." Honestly, I think I dozed off. The next thing I remember is Phil and Andorra helping me out of the car. I might have pretended to be more helpless than I was, especially when Andorra leaned into me for support as we walked to the door. Phil had to help me up the stairs to my bedroom. Once he left, I relaxed again, and Andorra started to help me make myself comfortable. Sometimes when you're not fully aware, you can end up saying things you wouldn't normally say. It felt like a good chance to take a risk. But maybe the drinks didn't help me pick the right words. Then, out of nowhere, the perfect moment came. Andorra was leaning over me, looking right into my eyes. "You know, you're really something, Andorra," I mumbled. "And what does that mean?" she asked. "That you're amazing, and I want to be near you," I slurred, probably with a silly grin. "Oh, really? Well, I think if you had anything to eat, you wouldn't keep it down. How much have you had to drink tonight?" "Not enough." "Wow, Pete, you're really out of it." "Yeah, but if I'd had a few more, I might actually tell you how much I care about you." A big smile appeared on Andorra's face. "I'll believe it when you say it's sober. Now get some sleep and we'll see how you feel in the morning." "Good night, Peter," she added, standing up to leave the room. "No, don't go," I insisted. "I might be sick and need help." "Okay, where am I supposed to sleep then?" I managed to grab Andorra's arm as she stood, gently pulling her down onto the bed beside me. She didn't try to get up again. We didn't say anything else, and I eventually fell asleep, probably pretty fast considering how much I had to drink. Andorra was right. The bright sunlight coming through the bedroom window didn't help my head at all. I was a bit sad to find that she was no longer there beside me. When I tried to lift my head from the pillow, I quickly realized it wasn't a great idea. I guess I let out a groan. "Here, drink this," I heard Andorra's voice from behind me. "What is it?" I asked, squinting at the sunlight as I turned to look at her. "Well, it's not poison, so no worries there. I just want to make sure you feel better." "What if I turn the tables and try to get rid of you first?" I joked back. If Andorra wanted to be funny, I thought I'd try too. "No, you couldn't do that. You've got 2 daughters to think about. One of them's yours." "That's not how they see it, Peter. They consider themselves sisters and think of you as their dad." "Oh, and you. I think I'm seen as Otterly's mom now. You might have noticed that the Aunt Andorra nickname has been fading. She has called me Mummy several times recently." "Really? I hadn't noticed." "I know, and you didn't react when Rachel started calling you Dad a few weeks ago either." "Oh, I guess I'm not very observant. Has she really been calling me that?" "Daddy, to be exact, Peter. She's been calling you Daddy for about a month now." Even Carol and Frank noticed it. "Did you talk to Carol on Boxing Day?" I asked. "I talked about a lot with her," Peter replied. "That explains it." "What do you mean?" Why, she's already thinking about her wedding outfit, I said, trying to smile, even with my thoughts feeling like a storm. Andorra was sitting there staring at me, still holding the drink she had made for me. "Well?" I asked, after what felt like a long silence. Andorra wore a confused look. I expected her to ask me something, but she didn't. "Well, what?" she responded. "Are you going to marry me or not?" "You haven't asked me yet." "I know. I was trying to see how you felt before I asked. It's better to know before facing rejection." "Well, I don't think you'd look silly if you ask." "But," Andorra said. "But what?" "I have something to tell you before you decide anything." "Oh, should I be worried?" I said. "No, but I am. I'm not a widow, Peter. Tony isn't dead. Actually, I was never legally married to him. I thought I was, but it turns out I wasn't." "I'm a bit confused," I admitted. "Tony was a bigamist. He had another wife when I married him, so my marriage to him isn't real." "Oh, no." "Correct. Tony married 3 of us at different times and ran away during his trial. That's why I told Rachel he was dead. If they find him, he'll be in trouble for a long time. I doubt they'll ever find him anyway." "So you're not a widow, and you were never married?" I asked. "No, technically I'm just someone who has a child without being married. It's easier to say I'm a widow." "Then will you do me the honor?" I didn't get to finish my question, and Andorra didn't get to answer. I wasn't even sure what happened to that drink. But we spent the next hour laughing, enjoying each other's company. My headache faded as we shared light moments together. By the time Frank brought the girls home in the afternoon, everything felt lighter. Andorra and I were sitting in the kitchen making plans and thinking about how to tell the girls our news, but we didn't really need to tell them. The girls seemed to know right away. It might have been because Andorra was almost on my lap when they came bursting in. They stopped suddenly, stared at us for a moment, then gave each other high fives before coming over to hug us. We both felt like we had bright signs above our heads when Frank walked in. He took a quick look at us and said, "Congratulations! When?" Andorra and I understood that as him asking what date we had picked for our wedding. This led to more talking, which included Carol, whom Frank called on the phone. We eventually picked a date, just a random one, in the middle of February. Andorra and I wanted a simple wedding, but our girls wanted something bigger and more exciting. We ended up finding a middle ground. We chose to have the ceremony at the registry office, followed by a nice but small reception since neither of us had many living family members. We picked the registry office because we didn't want to deal with announcements or potential confusion. There were no public notices to worry about, especially since Andorra was supposed to be a widow. After Frank went home, Andorra had to talk to her boss at the cab company about taking time off. There was no way I wanted my wife working late shifts anymore. It was more about my own feelings. I just didn't like the idea of being alone at night. That night, as we got ready for bed, we faced another important choice. In the end, we decided to keep separate bedrooms until after the wedding. We realized it would be hard to explain any choices we made about relationships to our daughters later if they saw us sharing a room now. But that didn't stop me from making a habit of coming home for lunch most days once the girls were back in school. I took some longer breaks, but no one at the office seemed to mind since I was in better spirits. Andorra completed her last shifts at the cab company the next weekend. On Sunday morning, we had to take several taxis to bring home all the flowers and boxes of chocolates, which kept us busy for weeks. Andorra didn't work that Sunday night because some of the drivers and their spouses took us out for dinner and a little celebration at a local pub. Taxis were hard to find in town that night. The wedding came up quickly and went very well. Our girls were wonderful as bridesmaids. I think Andorra and Carol spent more time making them look just right than they did on my bride. But as I've said before, Andorra would look good no matter what she wore. Andorra and I didn't really have a honeymoon. We stayed one night in the fancy hotel where the reception was held, while the girls spent the night with Frank and Carol's children. Our big plan was to take a trip for most of the summer break with the girls. That first year, we explored Florida, the Caribbean, and Southern California for 5 weeks. We moved around a lot, rarely staying in one place for more than a few days to see and experience as much as we could. About a week or two after the wedding, I got home from work one evening and knew something was off. The girls seemed happy, but Andorra seemed restless. After the girls went to bed, she told me what was bothering her. "Rachel knows that Tony isn't dead," she said, when I came down from tucking in the girls and reading them a chapter of their book. "Wow, how did she find out?" I asked, surprised. I thought we had never talked about him when the girls were around. "I don't know. But I've had a feeling something was wrong since we moved here. You know those pictures by the girls' beds? Well, the girls' beds are set up next to each other. There are 3 small cabinets by their sides. The middle one has 2 pictures, one of Andorra and one of me. The others have pictures of Marjorie and Tony. Andorra explained that she had noticed the girls hiding the pictures of Marjorie and Tony in the drawers most nights. Suddenly, I realized I hadn't seen those pictures that evening. Eventually, Andorra asked the girls why they were hiding the pictures. Rachel answered, "They don't want us, so we don't want to see their pictures." After talking more, Andorra found out that Rachel understood her father wasn't dead from an accident, but had left. However, she didn't seem to know why. Andorra, feeling embarrassed, decided to keep some details from Rachel. She didn't want to explain to her that she was technically born out of wedlock. While Andorra worried about how Rachel would feel knowing her father was out there, the child didn't seem to care at all. I believed that sharing information helped the girls feel closer to each other. Andorra was a fantastic wife and an amazing mother to our girls. She was wonderful with the kids and very patient with me, especially when work became stressful. Even though I have my flaws, Andorra never brought them up, which I appreciated. She had a great sense of humor and always found fun ways to lighten the mood in the evenings, especially after the kids were asleep. Some nights were quite tiring for us. By the start of summer, Marjorie's calls to Otterly had almost stopped. I wasn't surprised, since Otterly had changed her approach and was more outspoken when Marjorie did call. I knew Otterly felt upset with her mother, but both Andorra and I had to step in when Otterly referred to Andorra as her new mummy during those conversations. After that, Otterly started talking about how enjoyable our family outings were, mentioning Daddy's wife and my sister Rachel frequently. Andorra and I discussed how Otterly interacted with Marjorie on phone calls several times. In the end, we realized we could not create a long list of words Otterly should avoid. She would surely come up with new terms on her own with Rachel's help. We decided that Marjorie had brought this on herself, and she would have to deal with it. Not long after our holiday, Otterly and Rachel began again with the mummy and daddy questions. For a while, Andorra and I struggled to understand what they meant, but eventually we figured out they were asking if we were truly their parents, and I partly blamed the internet. Suddenly, we started finding printouts about adoption procedures around the house. It seemed like they wanted Andorra to adopt Otterly and me to adopt Rachel. The girls even researched the process of changing Rachel's name to Thomas and had printed out the needed forms. After discussing the adoption idea, Andorra and I agreed that we would either adopt both girls or none of them. Rachel's father, even though he had left, still had legal rights over her. Eventually, we decided to seek help from the same lawyer who handled my divorce. It took more than a year, but we finally succeeded in having Tony's parental rights removed, and both adoptions were completed. By chance, or because of our lawyer, the same judge who handled my divorce also decided on Tony's parental rights. I think this might have influenced his choice. Legally, our family now included Mr. and Mrs. Thomas, along with our daughters, Otterly and Rachel. We talked about having more children, but decided against it for now. Not long after we married, I got a promotion at work, which meant a better salary and less stress. Our summer trips became a cherished tradition. I believe Andorra planned these trips to make up for my missed adventures when I was younger. In our second year of marriage, we spent 5 weeks traveling through Europe. The third year, we explored India and Sri Lanka. In the fourth, we went to Australia and New Zealand, though we mistakenly went in the middle of their winter. Being British, we were used to the change. By our 5th summer, we were experienced travelers. Otterly and Rachel, both 14 by then, had their own video cameras and were getting good at recording our adventures. That year, our plans included Canada, the northern USA, and Alaska. My 3 girls spent the winter and spring planning the trip. I mostly let them handle it, only suggesting a few interesting places I had heard about long ago, knowing we would visit them during our travels. One thing we didn't consider was the Christmas cards from Marjorie. About 2 years after our wedding, both Andorra and I started receiving cards from her. Otterly had always received cards for Christmas and her birthday, but we were puzzled about why Marjorie was sending them to us now. We couldn't reply because none came with a return address. What I didn't notice at first was that all the cards had Canadian stamps. This might lead someone to think Marjorie and Ronald had moved to Canada. Sadly, Marjorie wasn't mentioned much in our home anymore, and she hadn't called Otterly in years, so it wasn't something we discussed. As always, the plan for our summer vacation changed over time. The girls told me it wasn't possible to visit every place on our list, even after we cut it down quite a bit. In the end, we decided to draw a line across the continent, similar to what we had done a few years earlier. That summer, we decided to visit the West, leaving the East for another time. We flew into Winnipeg on an Air Canada flight in late June. After spending a day or two exploring some historic sites near the city, nothing too detailed since this isn't a travel guide, we started our journey in a rental car. We traveled west from Manitoba into Saskatchewan, then turned south, making our way through the Dakotas and Nebraska, all the way down to Kansas. After that, we headed west and then north again, passing through Colorado and Wyoming, where we spent a few days at what I think is called a dude ranch. The horses were nice to ride, but I think I'll stick to English saddles from now on. While the Western saddles were comfortable, I felt like it might be harder to get off if anything went wrong. Not that I thought it would happen, but it crossed my mind. Riding neck reining was also a new experience for me. There are two ideas about riding horses or motorcycles when things become tricky. One is to stay on and hope you can regain control. The other is to jump off and hope to land on your feet. I never liked the idea of being on a large horse or a bike with its engine roaring and wheels spinning, ending up in a risky situation. Anyway, I got a bit off track. Eventually, we arrived in Montana and stopped at a town I had always wanted to visit. I had probably read about it in a Western novel or something similar. After we checked into our hotel or motel, whatever you want to call it, we went to a diner nearby. The diner was busy and noisy with people chatting away. Then suddenly there was a loud crash that made everyone stop talking. It turned out that a waitress had dropped a tray full of someone's meals. In moments like that, it's only natural to look around and see who made the noise. Andorra and I found ourselves doing just that, curious about the clumsy person who startled everyone. It wasn't very considerate of them to cause such a scene, especially since they were probably feeling quite embarrassed already. I quickly spotted the person responsible and was surprised to realize I recognized her. It seemed she recognized me, too. Her wide eyes made that clear. Looking back, I realized that her surprise might have caused her to drop the tray in the first place. From Andorra's reaction, it was clear she knew the woman as well. Andorra and I reacted almost the same way when we spoke to our daughters. "Eat your dinner, Rachel Otterly." "It's nothing for you to worry about," Andorra said to Rachel, and I said the same to Otterly. Even after 5 years, it was still hard to break old habits. Though we were now a blended family, both legally adopted, there was a natural urge to correct our own kids first. It didn't matter much, though. Both girls turned in their seats to see what had caused the disturbance. Otterly quickly faced forward again when she recognized the waitress. I think she quietly said, "Serves her right," before returning to her meal like nothing had happened. Rachel kept watching until the waitress hurried away. Then Rachel gave me a sweet smile, looked at her mother, and went back to eating, just like Otterly. The waitress leaving had caught the attention of some other diners who seemed to notice what had happened. Maybe some had looked our way before, but I didn't notice. It was clear that people understood we were connected to the situation. As a family, we tried to ignore the stares and focused on finishing our dinner. "It seems like things weren't as perfect as they seemed," Andorra whispered as we followed the girls to the car. "What do you mean?" I asked, maybe a little sharper than I wanted. She must not be with Ronald anymore if she's working here. "Maybe one of them was unfaithful. They say once it happens again. But she didn't do that to you. She just left you and Otterly. You can't really believe they didn't have some sort of relationship before the divorce. Plus, walking out on your daughter feels like a deep disappointment. Either she couldn't keep her distance or he couldn't be faithful. Does it really matter? Not really, as long as she doesn't try to make trouble now. Otterly is already confused. She doesn't need more stress. It's too late for any of that, Pete. Besides, I think Otterly handled it better than you did," After all, it was the girls who— Don't say it, Andorra. I know what the girls did, and I'm glad they're clever. But sometimes I do wonder how much they planned. What do you mean by that? Oh, it's nothing much. It just felt like they had a plan. Sometimes I wonder how early they planned this. Honestly, I'm really happy with how things turned out. I just get curious sometimes. By the time we reached the car, I used the remote to unlock the doors. The kids jumped into the back seat. I opened the front passenger door for Andorra. Instead of getting in, she stepped closer to me and embraced me warmly. The kids cheered from the back, calling out things like, "Not in public," and "Can't you wait until later?" Some might think it was a bit amusing for two 14-year-olds to say such things, but our daughters were wise beyond their years. Andorra had to grow up quickly after losing her husband when Rachel was just 6. Otterly faced her own challenges when her mother left us, which I didn't handle well, but with Rachel's support, she became much more mature than most kids her age. Suddenly, Andorra pulled back and whispered, "We have an audience," glancing over my shoulder. I turned and saw Marjorie standing in what looked like the kitchen doorway watching us. "Do you think Otterly should?" Andorra suggested. "Yes, I think we have to," I replied. I realized I would have to talk to Marjorie later, and it would involve setting up a private visit for Otterly. This was a good chance to clear things up. "Otterly," Andorra said, leaning into the car while I was still thinking. "Your mother is over there. You should go see her." "Do I have to?" Otterly asked. "She is your mother," Andorra said gently. "Please, you might regret it later if you don't go." With a sigh, Otterly climbed out of the car, looking back at us a few times. She walked toward her mother, but stopped about 10 feet away. Marjorie seemed to say something to her, but we couldn't hear it. When Marjorie took a step closer, Otterly quickly took a step back. It was a bit frustrating not being able to hear their conversation, but I didn't think Otterly would say much anyway. We noticed that whenever Marjorie moved towards Otterly, she backed away. "This isn't good," Andorra quietly said, probably so Rachel wouldn't hear. Almost immediately, Otterly turned and rushed back to the car. Without a word, she jumped into her seat, slammed the door shut, and began to buckle her seatbelt. When I looked back where Marjorie had stood, it was empty, so I figured she had gone inside. I would have rather gotten in the car and left, but Andorra had other plans. She was halfway to the door before Otterly even had her seatbelt fastened. So I stood there for 10 minutes until Andorra came back. When she finally got in the car, I gave her a confused look. She returned it with one that seemed to say, "Don't ask now, just drive. We'll talk later." That afternoon, our plan was to hike along a path by the river and see the waterfall the town was named after. We sensed that maybe the hydroelectric plant had taken away some of its original beauty, but it was still impressive. As usual, we took it easy on the hike, and the two girls moved ahead of us, giving Andorra and me a chance to talk. "So what did she say?" I asked. "He left her 2 years ago for a waitress in town," Andorra replied. "Just like we thought. But why hasn't she gone back to the UK?" "He left her with a motel bill. The motel needed help in the restaurant, so she decided to stay and work it off. She shares a room with another woman. They both work in the restaurant during the day and at a bar across the street at night." "Sounds exciting. What else does she have to do, Pete?" "Maybe she finds some comfort in the company around her," I added. "There's no need to be mean, Peter. Marjorie made a mistake, and now she seems to be dealing with the consequences. Anyway, you're meeting her after her shift at 6. She only has a couple of hours before she has to work at the bar, so you can talk while I take the kids for dinner." "Andorra, what am I supposed to say to her?" "You need some closure, Peter. Whatever you think. You need to sit down and talk to her. And remember, she is Otterly's mother." It's a shame she didn't think about that sooner. Those were Marjorie's words, Peter. She regrets what happened and wants to apologize to both Otterly and you. But I don't think Otterly is ready to hear that apology yet. That was clear from what happened at lunch. But over time, I'm sure she will. We just need to make sure we don't lose track of her again. You seem really positive about all this, especially after what Tony did to you. Pete, what's the point of living with hate all the time? What Tony did to me was really bad, maybe even worse than what Marjorie did to you and Otterly. For a while I felt angry at him and the other women he tricked into marrying him. But one day we were all waiting together at the police station, and I realized we were all in the same situation. We had all been fooled, and it wasn't our fault, so we became friends. And Tony, what's the use in wasting time being angry at him? If he ever shows up, I'll tell the police immediately. But I'm not going to waste my feelings on hating him. I have more important people to care about. Andorra hugged me warmly. Besides, if Marjorie hadn't left with that guy, where would we be now? Good point, Andorra. I know it is, my love. We should get going then. It's already past 4. I was waiting in the restaurant parking lot when Marjorie finished her shift. She came out with another woman who had dark hair. The woman looked at me carefully before going on her way. Marjorie seemed nervous, not at all like the confident person I remembered from the kitchen years ago. Still, she looked pretty good. Hi, Peter, thanks for coming. The bar should be quiet now. Shall we go over there and talk? I didn't say anything, but motioned for her to lead the way. I followed Marjorie to a booth at the back of the bar. It was clear we were expected. I had noticed the dark-haired woman sitting at the bar talking to the bartender when we entered. All the booths near ours were empty. The dark-haired woman followed us over and placed 2 beers on the table. She said something to Marjorie in what sounded like Spanish. Marjorie just nodded, so I guessed she had learned the language during her travels. You wanted to meet me, Marjorie, I reminded her, since I hadn't asked for this meeting. I just wanted to say I'm sorry, Peter, she finally whispered. I barely heard her. I'm not. You did me a huge favor, I replied. I'm not really the kind of person who deals with these situations well. Yeah, Andorra got the better part of the deal. I should have known she'd get close to you right after I left, Marjorie said bitterly. It was the other way around, Marjorie. Once I saw Andorra... I wasn't quite sure how to finish that sentence. Maybe I thought if I had met Andorra before Marjorie left, it might have been me who walked away. Maybe it's just wishful thinking, but I doubt I would have acted that way. I'm the type of person who cares too much about doing the right thing to be selfish. Sometimes I wonder if that's a flaw. What happened to your guy, anyway? I asked Marjorie. And where did he get all that money? I heard he left his family with nothing, and now his wife has taken all his bank accounts. Ronald's money? That's a joke. You mean everyone else's money? He's a con artist, Peter. He's wanted in many places. I wouldn't be surprised if that's why he left me. I helped him with some of his schemes, and we had to leave Argentina quickly when my picture showed up in the local news. I think he crossed into Canada when he heard the FBI was looking for him at the motel here. Ironically, he was spotted with one of the waitresses from the diner. Now I'm stuck working shifts like one of them. Weren't the FBI looking for you too? Well, yes, but not really. I made a deal with them. If I agree to testify against Ronald when they catch him, they won't come down hard on me. Basically, I got 2 years of probation for helping a fugitive escape. I have to stay in the country until they catch him, and I have to check in with the authorities every week. Thankfully, Buster, the deputy I report to, is usually around the diner. Are you still in debt? Yes, I was drowning in it. I signed for almost everything, including the rental car Ronald and his accomplice took off in. I've almost paid it all off, but I still owe a couple of $1,000s. No, Pete, I can't. Marjorie had seen me reaching for my checkbook. For once, listen to me, Marjorie. I'll write you a check for $5,000. That's nearly $10,000, which should settle your debts and give you a little extra. If you ever decide to go back to the UK when they finally catch him, we'll help you find a place and settle in. But don't think this means you can disrupt our family. And just so you know, the courts have taken away your parental rights regarding Otterly. She made that clear to me this morning. I'm sorry to hear that. That wasn't our intention. I understand when Andorra came into the kitchen. Pete, I was foolish. I never meant to hurt you and Otterly. I got caught up in Ronald's stories. Trust me, it wasn't as exciting as it sounded. Marjorie, that was a long time ago. Honestly, I'm just glad you're safe and doing well. Otterly and I have started a new chapter in our lives, and I'm sorry, but you're not part of it anymore. However, Andorra and I will make sure that Otterly stays connected with you. I really don't deserve this, Peter, or the money you gave me. You should take it. It will help me feel better when we leave tomorrow. We'll stop by the diner for breakfast in the morning, and maybe we can get Otterly to talk to you nicely. I don't deserve your kindness, Peter. No, you don't, Marjorie. I had to be honest, even if I wanted to hold back. But you are Otterly's mother, and that's something I can't change. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to return to my family. Of course, I'm sorry, Pete. I got up and walked away without looking back. When I finally found the girls, it felt like everyone had been holding their breath for me. I took Andorra aside and quickly shared what I discussed with Marjorie, including the money I had given her. "She doesn't appreciate you," was Andorra's reaction when I mentioned the check. "She said something similar," I replied, giving my wife an affectionate look. "But you truly deserve it." "Thank you," she said softly in response. Later, I talked to Otterly alone and was about to start on the "you have only one birth mother" speech when she told me that Andorra and Rachel had already spoken with her. From that point on, the conversation changed. Otterly said she would be willing to talk to her mother the next morning and promised to keep her tone civil. However, she insisted that Rachel or I had to be there with her. When I asked why, she simply said that one of us had always been there during good times. I wasn't sure what to make of that, but chose to let it go. The next morning, Marjorie, Otterly, and Rachel talked at a nearby table for a long time. I think Marjorie's friends were helping her because she was supposed to be working. Andorra and I could only hear bits of their conversation about how well the garden was doing back at home. Despite everything, they all had smiles most of the time. As we left, Marjorie walked to the car with us and said goodbye to both girls. Then she turned to Andorra and me. "Those two are so lucky. They have the best parents in the world," she said, surprising me a bit, then hurried back inside the restaurant. I think she started showing her emotions as she ran. I hugged my wife, then we got in the car and drove north toward the border in Calgary. From what I saw in the rearview mirror, I don't think either of the children looked back or seemed too bothered that we were leaving that town behind. Life continues. Epilogue. After we got home that year, Marjorie kept in touch. Andorra began writing to her quite often, I believe. We never found out if Ronald was ever located by the FBI. But we heard less than a year later that Marjorie was going to marry her deputy sheriff or something like that. We held a family meeting, and after some deep thoughts, we decided to decline the invitation to Marjorie's wedding. However, I ended up going on my own for a few days to attend. I can't explain why, but it felt important for me to go. Buster, or Buddy as everyone called him, turned out to be a really nice guy once I got to know him. He even picked me up from the airport and introduced me to his friends and family. I learned from Buddy that Marjorie had been completely honest with him from the start. She told him everything about her past choices and how much she regretted them. It turned out Buddy had arranged for some of his truck-driving friends to send her Christmas cards to us from different towns in Canada. I think Marjorie was trying to navigate her situation in a way that would protect us. It felt a bit strange to support my ex-wife at her wedding, but someone had to do it. Maybe that's why I went. It helped me find a sense of closure. I don't think Otterly and Rachel figured out where I went for those 5 days, but they might have. They were always one step ahead of me on almost everything, and honestly, they still are. Over the next few years, we heard that Marjorie had 2 boys. Although we've only seen them in pictures now that they are a bit older, I believe they keep in touch with Otterly and Rachel regularly. However, neither of my daughters mentions Marjorie or her sons to me very often. Eventually, Otterly and Rachel both married 2 brothers. Sometimes I feel sorry for those poor guys. The girls are still very close and definitely lead in their marriages. When they start planning together, it takes a special kind of man to stand his ground. I don't think I ever could. Each of them has 2 children and, interestingly, both times they had their babies around the same time. Andorra and I have loved watching our grandchildren grow up just like their mothers did. I retired last year as the director of my company, and now Andorra and I are enjoying an 8-month cruise around the world. We were hoping to find a nice place to settle down, but honestly, I think our daughters and their families will bring us back home to the UK. We didn't sell our house. Our daughters insisted we keep it because of the roses. They spend a lot of time taking care of the garden, and we get regular updates. Just this morning, I was checking my email and saw a picture of my garden from them titled, "It's been a good year for the roses. Life goes on." Before moving on to the second story, please let me know your opinion. Do you like the story long or short, a series or separate parts? The comments section is always welcome, and don't forget to let me know which of these 2 stories you like better. Story 2, Doing the Right Thing, Chapter 1. The Truth Comes Out. This is a story that sounds almost unbelievable. It could be a movie about the ups and downs of my life. I was happily married for over 30 years, or so I believed. I have 3 children whom I love very much. I started my own business, which began as a gas station. It has now grown into a convenience store. I'm not rich, but I make a decent living. Let me take you back a few years when my son was taken to the hospital. He was 28 at the time, married with a wife and 2 children. He was diagnosed with a kidney issue. My wife, Annabelle, whom I call Annie, and I were very worried for our son's health. The doctors told us that if they couldn't manage the kidney problem, he might need a transplant. Unsure how to help him, the doctor suggested we talk to family members in case a transplant was needed. Since he was my son, I went to the lab to see if I would be a good match. I didn't tell Annie about this. I wanted to find out first before involving anyone else. The next day, the test results came back, and I learned we were not a match. Confused, I asked the doctor why, since he was my son. I couldn't understand what could be wrong. I expressed my feelings, which is not something I typically do. The doctor seemed a bit embarrassed, but eventually asked me to come into his office. "Mr. Weller," he said, "you and your son are not a match because, according to the test, you are not his biological father. I'm very sorry to tell you this, but we will rerun the test, just in case there was a mistake." I left the office in shock. He has been my son for 28 years. I couldn't believe what was happening. I didn't want to tell Annie right away, hoping it would turn out to be wrong. When I saw her, I know I looked upset. A whirlwind of thoughts raced through my mind. What about Janice, my oldest daughter, or Mandy, the little joy of my life? Were they my children? At that time, Janice was 26 and Mandy was 20. I really hoped the doctor was mistaken. It had been 2 days and I was feeling lost. Part of it was thinking about my son possibly being very unwell, and part of it was wondering if he was actually my son. Annie, Brad's wife, Gail, and I were sitting in the waiting room together. The doctor finally came out and said, "I have some good news." I felt a spark of happiness, thinking he'd say my kidneys were a perfect match for Brad. Instead, he shared great news for Brad. Brad's health is improving. He won't need a transplant after all. His body is responding so well to treatment that he can go home in a couple of days. He just needs to be careful about what he eats, but he should recover completely. Everyone was so relieved for Brad. The women were emotional, and Annie embraced me with gratitude. There was so much relief on her face, and I hadn't mentioned the test results to her yet. I planned to speak with the doctor again the next day. I asked Janice, Mandy, and Annie for a DNA sample. When they asked why, I explained that if any of us had health issues like Brad's, the doctor could provide help faster with this information. Annie looked a bit anxious, but agreed. The others didn't hesitate at all. It was just a simple mouth swab. In fact, Janice even took samples from her kids and husband, getting them ready in case there was ever a need. The next day, I visited the doctor at the hospital and handed over all the samples. He then delivered the tough news that Brad and I were not biologically related. I requested him to run the tests on all the samples and keep the records for any future needs. I offered to cover the costs for everything. "Mr. Weller, are any of these your family?" "They're all my family. My 2 daughters, my son-in-law, and my grandchildren. I must know if Janice and Mandy are my biological children. Even though they are grown, they have always been my kids." A few days later, Brad was allowed to leave the hospital. He needed to rest for another week, but would be able to return to work afterward. We were all so happy that he wouldn't have to endure dialysis or a transplant. I tried to stay calm, but it was hard. I really needed to find out if Janice and Mandy were my biological daughters. Annie often questioned me about why I seemed off. I told her we had been through a lot and that I was reflecting on our kids, which was true in a way. One evening, I returned home from work to find Annie sitting at the table with some papers, and she was distressed. I realized it was the hospital test results. "When did you do this and why?" she asked me. "I went to have my kidneys checked to help our son." He stopped seeing me after I found out I was going to have Brad. I was really angry at him. He came over to see Brad and asked if he was his child. I told him I wasn't sure, but I wouldn't say anything to you unless he married me. He just laughed and said I could take care of his child. Do you really think I'm that naive? It just happened? What does that mean? Did you trip, and somehow that led to you being with him? Your clothes vanished, and you didn't think twice? If you expect me to believe that it just happened, you are more foolish than I ever imagined. And if you stopped seeing him, what about Janice? Was she just a coincidence too? I told him he couldn't come to our house unless you or Mary were there. I had feelings for him, but I learned he was just using me. One day he came by and pressured me to comply with his demands. He said if I didn't, he would tell you about Brad. I felt trapped and scared. When he left, he laughed and made a hurtful comment. I couldn't tell you about it. I didn't want to lose you. Not long after Janice was born, Harvey had that car accident. I felt sad but also relieved. I could finally put that behind me, and we could have a normal life. I grew to love you more with each passing day. Life with you has been good, hasn't it? I spent my whole life trying to make it up to you. We've had our issues, but overall we had a good marriage, didn't we? Asked Annie. Yes, our marriage was good. But looking back, I see it was all based on lies. You were unfaithful. You married me while still caring for someone else. You had another man's child, and then you didn't tell me when you got pregnant again. Now you want me to just forget all of it. I don't think I can or want to. I'm going to our attorney to start the process of divorce. Dan, you can't! What about our kids? How will you explain this to them? I'll leave that to you. Just so you know, I don't believe you were pressured, and I think you would have continued seeing him if he hadn't passed away. You have a week to tell me what you want the kids to know. After that, I'll tell them the truth. I assume Brad and Janice don't know I'm not their real father. Of course not. No one knows but me and you now. Please, Dan, they love you. Don't hurt them by saying a man they've never met is their father. I am their father, and they are my kids. Nothing will change that. I've been there for them their entire lives, and that won't change. For now, I think we should both live here until we settle everything, unless you have someone else. That's uncalled for, Dan, and you know it. No, that's the issue. I've been with you for 30 years, yet I feel like I hardly know you. I will move my things into the guest room. I don't want to be around you anymore. Annie began to cry as I stood up from the table and started moving some of my things into the guest room. 2 days later, I received a call at the store. They informed me that my wife's car had gone off the road and down a hill. They said it appeared she was driving too fast and missed a turn. She was declared dead at the scene. The sheriff asked me if my wife had been facing any problems. I told him I didn't know of any. He said he would record it as an accident, but was going to wait for the autopsy results. I didn't want to bring up any old issues now. I had loved her, but I also felt anger toward her, if that made sense. I called my children to tell them about their mother's passing. I informed them that I would go to the hospital to identify her. I suggested they reach out to relatives to share the news. It was a shock to everyone, including me. Now I had to live with the question of whether it was an accident or something more. A few days later, the autopsy results came back normal. Aside from her blood pressure medication, the coroner found nothing else. Her death was ruled an accident. At the funeral, I mourned her loss. Even though I was planning to get a divorce, I still had deep feelings for her after 30 years. I was relieved I hadn't seen a lawyer yet. No one needed to find out about Annie's secret. That was something I would have to bear alone. It wouldn't help to tell the kids now. The day after the funeral, my 2 daughters and daughter-in-law visited. I asked them to take their mother's belongings and divide them among themselves. All I wanted were a few family pictures. No one could truly understand how I felt unless they had gone through something similar. Thoughts of what if kept running through my mind. What if I hadn't taken that test? What if I hadn't told Annie about it? What if I hadn't said I wanted to leave? Would any of it have changed anything? Or was she just driving too fast that day? Chapter 2. Getting involved. That all happened 2 years ago, right before the holidays. Here I was again, alone for the holidays. My son and older daughter both lived about 100 miles away. I told them I might visit for a day or two. Mandy, my daughter, was a senior in college and mentioned she would be traveling to England with friends during the holidays. It was a trip the college offered. She worried about me being alone. I tried to reassure my kids that I had been living alone for 2 years now. I spent nearly every day at the service station store and was rarely alone there. One day, I sat comfortably in my big chair, watching a few shows on the television. A commercial played that I had seen many times. It asked viewers to donate $24 a month to provide meals, shelter, and education for a child in a developing country. I couldn't help but wonder if people really believed this. Now, don't get me wrong. I want to help those in need, but if I could really do all that for $24 a month, I should just move there. Honestly, I'm not comfortable just sending money and hoping it makes a difference. For those who choose to do this and believe it will help, I admire their kindness. However, it sparked an idea in me. The next day, while I was at the store, a local minister came in and I asked him if the church was doing anything for Christmas where families in need are helped. "Yes, Dan, we have a program. Do you have a family in mind you'd like to help?" he replied. "No, Pastor Jim. I want to help a family that really needs it this holiday," I said. "That's wonderful, Dan. Just come by the church and choose a name." "We have many families this year," he responded. "Jim, can you find me a family that truly needs support? I want to help someone for whom this will make a big difference. I don't just want to give a toy. I want to create a memorable holiday for them." Pastor Jim smiled, understanding that I wanted to truly impact a family's life. "I think I have the right family for you," he said. "There's a widow with 3 children who has recently moved here. Her husband sadly passed away, and she's trying to give her kids a fresh start." "Thank you, Jim. I might not attend church regularly, but I really want to help someone this year. I'll come by later to get the family's details." When I mentioned my lack of church involvement, Pastor Jim understood. I believed in something greater than myself. When Annie was alive, I attended church twice a year for the holiday services and for weddings and funerals. The name I received from the church was Carmela Wilson. She was a widow with 3 children, and the paper included her address and phone number. Pastor Jim told me she worked as a waitress at Joe's restaurant. I realized I probably knew her. I had eaten at Joe's many times and recognized the waitress named Carmen. After checking on things at the store, I decided to visit Joe's diner to speak with Carmen. As I walked in, I noticed Joe, the owner, wave at me. We had been friends since we were kids, and our shared experience as business owners brought us closer. I sat at a table, glancing around. It was between breakfast and lunch, so it was pretty quiet. I noticed Carmen, who smiled at me and said she would be with me shortly. A bit about Carmen. She was around 30, a pleasant-looking woman, but I wouldn't call her stunning. She was tidy and attractive, with dark hair that fell to her shoulders. She had a nice figure, neither too thin nor too heavy, and a lovely smile that stood out. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I'd like a cup of coffee and some conversation, if you don't mind." "Sure, I can get you the coffee, but I'm not so sure about the conversation," she replied. "I'm sorry, I'm not great at talking. This isn't a pickup line. I chose your name from the church tree, and I want to be your holiday friend." "I'm not really sure what you mean." "I'll get your coffee," she said, walking over to Joe. When she returned, he was shaking his head. "Okay, Joe says you're okay. I often have men trying to approach me, and that's not what I need right now." "What do you want? What is a holiday friend?" "The church mentioned gifts for the kids, but not a friend." "The friend idea is mine. Let me explain. I saw on TV that for $24 a month, you could sponsor a child in another country, providing meals, clothes, education, and shelter." "Isn't your name Dan?" "My kids drink that much in milk alone. I can't do much more than that." She smiled, and it was such a nice smile. "I understand. I decided to support a family for the holidays, and I want to help your family have a memorable Christmas. I'm not wealthy, but I can offer some assistance this year, and I chose you." Carmen looked surprised. "Are you serious? I've been worried about my kids this year. You know my husband—" "I know, Carmen. He passed away. Please allow me to help you and the kids. If you feel I'm intruding, just tell me and I'll step back." "Why are you doing this? Don't you have family you can help instead of a stranger?" "My wife died 2 years ago in a car accident." "Oh, I'm so sorry for your loss." "It's all right, Carmen. My holidays haven't been great, so this year I wanted to help someone else feel happy. I have 3 adult children. My son is in his 30s and my daughter is 29. Both of them are married and have their own families. I also have a younger daughter who is a college senior and will be going to England over Christmas. Thankfully, they all have what they need. So, what do you think? Can we be friends for the holidays?" "You seem friendly, Dan, so I will say yes for my kids' sake. Just no funny business. My family and I have been through a lot this year. What do you need from me?" "A refill of coffee would be nice to start, and I'd like to know how I can help you." She filled my cup and said she had to get back to work. Jo was nice, but she needed to focus on her job. We agreed to chat after she finished work the next day. I asked her if she'd like to go out for dinner, but she said she needed to be with her kids. Instead, she invited me to her home where I could join them for dinner if I liked macaroni and cheese. How about this, Carmen? I'll pick up a pizza and we can enjoy that together. Does pepperoni and cheese sound good? She smiled. That sounds perfect, but you better bring two. My 8-year-old can eat half of one by himself. Later that evening, I stopped by her house and was surprised to find it was in a public housing area. For those who aren't familiar, these places receive support for rent, food, and other needs. Unfortunately, they can be challenging environments because of various difficulties. Now I really wanted to help Carmen and her children as much as I could. When I arrived, her 8-year-old son answered the door. He was a friendly boy who asked what I wanted. I explained that I was there with pizza for his mom. His face lit up with a big smile. Mom said a friend was bringing us pizza tonight. We don't get store-bought pizza very often. As I walked in, 2 other kids ran up to me excitedly, exclaiming about the pizza. Carmen came in from another room, looking like she had tidied things up a bit. Kids, remember your manners. I thought I taught you to be polite when we have visitors. Sorry, Mom. We were just really excited, her oldest son said. He then looked at me. Can we have the pizza now? Kids, this is Dan, a friend of mine. You can call him Uncle Dan or Mr. Dan. I jumped in. Or just call me Dan. What are your names? The oldest said first, I'm Mike and I'm 8 years old. Then the second one chimed in. I'm Mark and I'm 6. That's my little sister, Molly. Molly spoke up. I know who I am. I'm Molly and I'm 4, almost 5. I go to preschool and I'm pretty smart. She was a sweet little girl who looked just like her mom. Everyone started eating pizza. As I looked around, I noticed that their family was having a tough time. The furniture looked old, and they didn't have many things. I had only seen the kitchen and living room, and the TV was on, but the picture wasn't very clear. While the kids enjoyed their pizza and watched cartoons, I asked Carmen how I could help. Oh, I wasn't ready for this. My kids and I are doing okay. We eat well enough, but they want things that other kids have, and I just can't afford them. You saw our old TV with its bad picture. I got basic cable so they'd have something to watch. We shop at secondhand stores for clothes, but they are happy with what they get. They are really great kids. I'm worried about getting bikes or things we have to keep outside because I'm afraid they might get stolen. So, Dan, just know that my kids would be happy with anything they receive. Okay, I'll see what I can do. Your kids really do seem great. Mike, since you're the oldest, do you think everyone would like to go to the movies on Saturday? I heard there's a new Harry Potter movie out. Wow, that sounds awesome. Mom, can we go? Please. I suppose so, but only if you kids are good for the rest of the week. Carmen, that includes you too. Maybe we can eat at McDonald's afterward. Molly looked at me with excitement. I love McDonald's. They have happy meals and a playground. All right, Molly, just behave for your mom and we'll go there on Saturday. The kids were excited, and Carmen was smiling. I felt good about this plan. Making them happy made me happy, too. This continued for a few weekends. We took the kids to fun places. I would visit Joe's for lunch and always choose to sit in Carmen's area. I started leaving large tips of around $10. Dan, you really don't have to do that. Making my kids happy is all I need, Carmen said. So, you don't want the money? I smiled. That's not fair, Dan. I can definitely use the money. But it's just that I feel a bit uncomfortable talking about it. I feel like I owe you for everything you're doing for my kids. Can I cook Thanksgiving dinner for you or something? I need to do something for you, too. Let me check with my kids and see what plans we have, and I'll get back to you. Carmen, I'm helping because it makes me happy. I like supporting people who are trying to improve their lives. Please don't feel like you owe me anything. Just seeing the joy on the kids' faces is more than enough. Plus, seeing you smile is a joy on its own. I noticed she felt a bit shy and looked away. One weekend, Mandy came home and asked me what was new. I told her about Carmen and how I was trying to support her. Dad, do you think that's a good idea? You don't really know this woman. Sweetheart, helping someone and seeing their kids smile gives my life a new meaning. I feel good about what I'm doing. I started talking to Carmen. I want you to meet her, and then you can tell me what you think. I'm not sure, Dad. I feel a bit uneasy about this. You said they live in a rough area? Isn't that a tough place for a single mother and her kids? Exactly. That's why I want to help them. Maybe it can give them a fresh start. Mandy, you've always been my little girl, but now you're a lovely young woman. You don't need my help as much anymore, so I feel like I should help someone else. How about I invite Carmen over so you can meet her and the kids? You can share your thoughts afterward. Okay, Dad, but I can't promise anything. I'll tell you the truth. I could see that Mandy was a bit worried. She was my support and always looked out for me. I knew she would be honest. She was just like me. She didn't believe in lying. On Saturday, I welcomed Carmen and her kids to my home. It was a bit chilly, but I decided to cook outside on the grill anyway. I figured while I was grilling, Mandy would be busy inside preparing something too. Carmen arrived in a not-so-great car. She had all the kids buckled in and was helping them out when Mandy glanced at me. "Nice car, Dad," she said, obviously not impressed. "Why do you think I'm trying to help them? What would you have said if she pulled up in a fancy car?" "Good point, Dad. You got me there," she smiled. Mike and Mark dashed over to me. "Hi, Uncle Dan. Wow, is this your house? It's huge." I introduced the boys to Mandy while Carmen got Molly out of the car. "Mike, Mark, this is my daughter, Mandy." "Hi, boys, nice to meet you," said Mandy. "Hi, I'm Mike. I'm 8, and this is Mark. He's 6. That's Molly coming out of the car. She's our little sister, and she's 4. When Molly ran up to me, I picked her up. Mandy observed closely. "Molly's my little buddy. She can hold her own with her brothers just like you used to," I chuckled. "Carmen, this is Mandy, my pride and joy, and also my youngest." As they greeted each other, I could almost see them both thinking. Finally, Carmen smiled at Mandy and said, "I know this is different, and you probably have a lot of questions about me and why I'm here. I have some questions, too. But let's enjoy the day, and I'll try to answer what I can. Your dad is one of the kindest people I've ever met, so show me the kitchen and we can cook together. Men think grilling is a full meal, but we women know there's more to it." Mandy looked at me. "I already like her, Dad." They exchanged smiles, and we walked into the house. The kids were eager to look around. I told them it was fine as long as they didn't open drawers and avoided running. They explored each room and returned to share everything they found. They asked if they could watch my big-screen TV, so I suggested they come with me to the store to choose a couple of DVDs to enjoy. They all excitedly agreed, and Molly asked if she could join us. Carmen jumped in, saying, "Molly, why don't you stay here with me and Mandy to help cook? Let's enjoy some time together." Molly seemed pleased with that idea. She turned to me and said, "Uncle Dan, you take the boys and go ahead. I want to help the girls cook." It was amusing to hear such a big statement from a 4-year-old. I agreed and promised to rent a movie just for her. I picked The Little Mermaid, and Molly beamed while watching it. She invited Mandy and her mom to join her and told the boys they could watch too, but they had to be quiet. It was so cute to see her trying to act grown up. The girls decided we would host Thanksgiving at our house. Carmen and Mandy would prepare the meal, and I was in charge of keeping the kids entertained, which was easy enough. We had a pool, but it was closed for winter. However, I also had a hot tub. The kids planned to bring their swimsuits to enjoy it. After that, they could watch movies on the big TV. With over a month to plan Thanksgiving dinner, Mandy said she would contact Brad and Janice to inform them about our gathering. She would let them know about Carmen and the kids, and remind everyone to bring swimwear if they wanted to join in the hot tub. After Carmen and the kids went home, I had a nice chat with Mandy. "Dad, Carmen is really a wonderful person. She is so helpful and not afraid to work hard. She shared her past with me about her husband. It was heartbreaking to hear what she has gone through. I understand why you want to help her, especially with the kids. She doesn't make excuses for her life and seems to be trying her best. I think she really cares for you." "Of course she would. I'm helping her family, and I hope she feels grateful for it." "No, Dad, I mean cares in a deeper way, maybe even loves you." "She didn't actually say that, did she?" "Dad, she didn't need to. We women can often feel these things. I think you might be falling for her too. Just be careful and aware." "Come on, Mandy, I'm just glad to see her happy. This is the happiest I've seen you since Mom passed away over 2 years ago. I'm glad for you. I just want you to stay aware of your situation." I realized Mandy was right. I had strong feelings for Carmen and her kids. I wasn't sure where things were headed, but I had an idea. I just didn't know others were paying attention too. I received calls from Brad and Janet, and I tried my best to tell them how I was helping Carmen during the holidays. I mentioned that I found the family's name on the church tree. I think I made it sound better than it was. I told them Carmen wanted to show her thanks by helping cook Thanksgiving dinner. I could tell they had some doubts, but they agreed to come for dinner. For the next couple of weeks, Carmen and Mandy worked hard to get everything ready. They almost seemed like sisters, with Carmen, the older one, doing most of the planning. Mandy was at school most of the week and came home on Fridays. I stopped by the restaurant daily for lunch, mostly to see Carmen. I visited her apartment a couple of times each week to say hello to the kids and bring them some treats. Carmen said I was spoiling them. I should mention that it bothered me a bit seeing Carmen at her job. She was always friendly and nice to everyone. I noticed some men were interested in her, but she always smiled and engaged with them politely. I realized I had no reason to feel jealous that she was being friendly with others. Chapter 3. Making a Difference on Thanksgiving Day. Carmen and the kids arrived early. She looked lovely, even in a simple skirt and blouse. She and Mandy were already busy cooking. Mandy mentioned she invited her boyfriend to dinner, too. I had met him a few times. He was a paramedic still taking classes at the college where he met Mandy, who was training to be a nurse. They were both going to England to help at a hospital over the holidays, leaving a week before Christmas and returning on January 8th. I knew I would miss her during that time. Brad, his wife Gail, and 2 of my grandchildren came in. I hugged everyone, and the kids asked when they could use the hot tub. I told them later since I wanted them to meet some other kids first. I introduced them to Mike, Mark, and Molly. They all seemed to get along well. We walked into the kitchen where Mandy hugged her brother and introduced Carmen. Brad, Gail, this is Carmen, a good friend of Dad's and mine. I felt happy when she said that. Brad greeted her, but I could see he was thinking. Gail said hello and asked if the girls needed help. Before anyone got back to cooking, Janice and her husband Rob arrived. We went through the introductions again, and Jan's kids dashed down to the basement to play with the other kids. We had games and coloring books ready for them to enjoy in the basement. The place was all newly decorated, complete with a TV and DVD player for the kids to enjoy. While the women went back to cooking, the guys and I tried to stay out of their way. I knew they wanted to hear more about Carmen, so I did my best to share her story without showing too much emotion. I wasn't sure I was explaining it well. "She's a pretty girl, Dad. Is she about my age?" asked Brad. "She's 31, Brad. She's a wonderful person who really needs a bit of support," I replied. Rob, who always called me Dad, chimed in, "Aren't you a bit worried she might develop feelings for you or you for her?" "Well, I'm a widower and she's a widow. Sure, she's younger, but if something develops, that'll happen," I said. "Dad, you haven't been with her, right?" Brad asked. "That's a bit personal, Brad. But since you're my son, I'll share. No, I haven't even tried to get closer to her in that way. I think she's a great woman and I care about her." "Sorry, Dad. I know it's not really my place to ask, and I guess you miss Mom. It's been 2 years. This isn't about your mom. I'm living my life, and if I find someone appealing, that's my choice. Let's change the topic. We should check on the kids. Your wives are busy cooking, and you should help keep an eye on the little ones." So we headed downstairs to watch the kids. Carmen's kids seemed to be getting along well. Every few minutes, Molly would come up to chat with me. I could tell it irked Brad, but Rob thought she was adorable. Mandy came down with her boyfriend, Ross, to introduce him to everyone. I recognized Ross from previous meetings, and I thought he had met Brad before, too. After Mandy went back upstairs, Ross joined our chat. "I just met Mandy's friend Carmen. She's really nice. Mandy mentioned her husband was unfortunately killed. That's really sad," Ross said. I called over Carmen's kids and introduced them to Ross. "Nice kids. It's a shame about their dad." "It's great of you to help them out, Mr. Weller," Ross remarked. "Thanks, Ross. I chose a family from a church tree and found one that really needed support. I didn't want to share that I had specifically asked Pastor Jim for a certain type of family." "So, Ross, what's new with you? I bet school and work keep you busy," I asked. "Definitely, but we have a trip in a couple of weeks. Even though it's work, I'll get to spend some time with Mandy," he replied. "How's it going with you two?" Brad asked. Ross glanced at me before answering. "I love her, and I was thinking about proposing when we're in England, in front of Big Ben. Mr. Weller, would I have your blessing to ask her?" "Ross, you don't need my permission. Mandy is strong and can make her own choices. If you want my blessing, you have it, I said with a smile. Are you sure about this? Are you really going to ask her? I think so, but please, let's keep it quiet for now. I want to find out if she's ready for that step before I ask. I love her, but I want her to feel certain, he said. Don't worry, Ross, we won't say a word. Good luck. I understood how he felt. Honestly, I felt the same way, but I knew it wasn't the right time to say anything. The day turned out well. The dinner was delicious and everyone seemed happy. The kids took turns enjoying the hot tub, but none of the adults wanted to join. Carmen said, maybe next time, and I planned to hold her to that. As the night went on, Mandy and Ross decided to have some time alone. I was busy helping Carmen clean up. Janice and Gail came in to assist. After we finished, Brad and his family were ready to leave. Brad told Carmen it was great meeting her and wished her well. Before leaving, Janice pulled me aside. Dad, Carmen is really nice, but I think she's too young for you. Why do you say that? I'm just helping her out. Dad, she cares for you. It's obvious. We asked her if she was dating, and she said she had a boyfriend. You're that boyfriend. She wouldn't have come here today if not. Just be careful. Once everyone had gone, Carmen gathered the kids and told me she had a wonderful time. She liked my family and thought they were great. I don't know why, but I leaned in and shared a gentle moment with her. When we pulled apart, she had a tear in her eye. You shouldn't have done that, Dan. I have to go. She took the kids, who quickly said goodbye and got into the car. I walked to her window and said, I'm really sorry. I overstepped. Please forgive me. The truth is, Dan, I've wanted you to do that for a long time. With that, she backed out of the driveway and drove away. I didn't hear from her on Friday, Saturday, or even Sunday. I worried about what I had done. On Monday, I went to the restaurant, but she wasn't there. Joe told me she had to take Molly to daycare and would be back soon. I had plans to return at lunchtime, but one of my employees called in sick, so I had to stay and cover the shift. I wanted to give Carmen space after crossing that line. I was meant to be her friend, not more than that. When I got home, my phone rang. I saw it was Carmen. Hello, Carmen, I'm sorry. Dan, our apartment was broken into. I just got back from picking up the kids and someone took our things, even our old TV. We hardly have anything left but a few clothes. She was crying. I don't know what to do. The police are here now taking a report. They thought it was just someone trying to steal things to sell for drugs. We didn't have much, but they took what little we had. Hearing her cry was heartbreaking. Carmen, take some bags and pack yours and the kids' clothes. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. Everything will be okay, I promise. Dan, I didn't know who else. It's all right, Carmen. I'm glad you called me. Now go pack your things and I'll be there soon. I drove to pick up Carmen and the kids. Molly was upset and said she was scared. I reassured her that everything would be fine. I was bringing them home with me. Carmen looked surprised when I arrived. I thought you'd just drop us off at a motel for the night. No, you're all coming to my home. Load all the bags in my car and I'll drive yours with your things. She didn't ask questions. She just followed my lead. I spoke to the police officer and told him they could reach Carmen at my house. I shared my phone number in case he needed to contact us. He mentioned they likely wouldn't recover her belongings since there wasn't anything of real worth to track down. The place had been messed up pretty badly. I thanked the officer and tried to start Carmen's old car, but it wouldn't start. The officer helped me jump it, and then I drove home. When I got there, Carmen and the kids were waiting on the porch. Why didn't you go inside? I asked. You weren't here, and we didn't want to just walk in, Carmen replied. Come on, boys. Help me bring the bags inside. Mike and Mark, take your things up to the bedroom with the bunk beds. If it's Molly's or your mom's stuff, put it in the front bedroom across from Mandy's room. Do you know where that is? Yes, sir. Boys' stuff upstairs, girls' stuff downstairs. If you're not sure, just leave it in the living room and your mom can decide later. Carmen, can you please come talk with me? Molly, why don't you help the boys organize everything? Molly was happy to help her brothers. Dan, what are we doing? We can't stay here. What will your kids think? Carmen, you need support tonight. Let's try this for a few days. It will give us time to figure things out. You and Molly can share the front bedroom and the boys will have plenty of space upstairs. But the boys have school, and Molly has preschool. I have to go to work. living here won't change that much. You'll just need to leave a little earlier. I can help too. I can drop off either Molly or the boys at school. Call them tomorrow and explain what happened. Tell them you'll be bringing the boys to school and give them my name so I can pick them up too. This will work, I promise. Dan, I care about you. I really like you a lot, and I want you to know that your kids see it too. Did you tell them? I asked. No, women just know these things. Men think differently. I can't speak for your son, Brad, but Mandy, Janice, and Gail can all tell. I'm sorry, but I can't hide how I feel. It shows. I'll take care of my kids. You've got enough on your mind. I went upstairs where the boys were sleeping and made sure the drawers were empty. Carmen helped the boys put their clothes away. While they did that, little Molly and I went downstairs to clear out the dressers in their room. I was glad I had already taken care of my wife's things after her passing. It made this part much easier. Soon, everyone came into the room with Molly and me. Molly asked her mom if she could put her things in the drawers. I took the boys to find something for dinner while Carmen put her personal items away. The boys and I made hot dogs and macaroni and cheese. Once it was done, we all sat around and chatted while we ate. Carmen asked about house rules. I said we would figure them out as we go. The kids needed to ask permission for anything until we knew what our rules would be. We let them know they couldn't go into my room or my office unless invited. They could not go near the pool at all, as it could be dangerous for them. They could only use the hot tub if their mom or I said it was okay. It wouldn't be an everyday situation. They could watch TV, but only if their mom or I agreed. It would be their job to keep their room tidy. Carmen laughed, knowing the boys weren't exactly neat. At least we had some rules in place. I looked at the boys and Molly, who always had big smiles on their faces. Kids, this is your home for now. You can have fun and be kids. Just remember to always ask your mom if you're unsure about something. Uncle Dan, what if we get hungry? Mike asked. Eat. That's what I do when I'm hungry. Tomorrow your mom and I will get you some snacks. There will always be food for you. Just know that when it comes to food, your mom is in charge. And if your mom says no, then please don't come and ask me. If I say no, don't put your mom in a tough spot. No means no. Any other questions? Molly raised her hand and I couldn't help but chuckle. I guessed she learned that at preschool. What is it, honey? Carmen asked. Can we play with the toys in the basement since they're not ours? Honey, you can play with any toys downstairs. We'll even talk to Santa this year and he might bring you some of your own, I told Molly. Molly raised her hand again. Can I go play with them now? Yes, sweetheart, go ahead. I'll be down with you soon, Carmen said. Molly got up and rushed downstairs. It wasn't long before the boys followed her. One of them shouted up, Uncle Dan, can we turn on the TV? I answered back, sure, just don't make it too loud. Carmen came over and hugged me. She had tears in her eyes and said, I don't know what I would have done without you. She stepped back and wiped her eyes. I knew I needed to say something comforting, but not too serious. I held her hands and said, I'll always be here for you. Let's see what the kids are doing. Together, we went down to the basement to join them. It felt like a family gathering. I remembered when Annie and I used to sit and watch the kids play. It felt right. As it got late, Carmen told the kids it was time for their baths and to get ready for bed. There were 3 bathrooms in the big house. She asked the boys to use the one upstairs and if Molly could use the main one on the first floor. Carmen, this is your home now. Of course, Molly can use the big bath. I'll use the basement shower if I need to. Just feel at home, I said. While Carmen got her kids ready for bed, I went into my office to do some work. I looked up and saw Molly peeking through the doorway. She wore her little nightgown and looked freshly cleaned up. Hi, Molly. Do you need something? I asked. I want to give you a good night gesture, but Mommy said I can't come in unless you say so. Come on in, sweetheart. She rushed in and climbed onto my lap, wrapping her little arms around my neck and giving me a gentle peck on the cheek. Good night, Uncle Dan, she said. Good night, sweetheart. Where's Mommy? She's upstairs talking with Mikey and Marky. Let's see if we can help, I suggested. Molly ran ahead up the stairs and I followed her. They were in the middle of a discussion. But Mom, Mike always gets his way because he's older. I just want the upper bunk and he said he gets first choice. Carmen looked at Mike while Molly and I stood back to listen. Did you really say that, Mike? That you get everything first because you're older? Yeah, I guess so, but I'm older, Mom. I should be treated that way. Mike, you're 2 years older than your brother. That should mean you are 2 years wiser. Do you really think arguing about a bed is worth it? Here's what I suggest. Find a way to share the upper bed that you can both agree on. Mike looked at Mark. Okay, Mark, here's the deal. This month you can have the upper bunk, and next month I'll get it. We'll take turns. Is that okay with you? Yeah, thanks, Mike. You're a great big brother, he said as he climbed up to the top bunk. It feels nice to help, doesn't it, Mike? Asked his mother. Yeah, I guess it does, Mom. Carmen gave her sons a kiss on the forehead, and we went downstairs where she put Molly to bed. I have to get back to my paperwork. And I need to shower and get ready for bed myself, replied Carmen. I went to my office and heard the shower running. Then, when the sound stopped, Carmen came out wearing a nightgown and robe with her hair still damp. Good night, Dan, and thanks again for everything. I looked up and asked her, Is there anything you don't look nice in? She smiled and went to her room. I took a deep breath and focused back on my work. The next morning was all about rushing around. She asked me to call Joe to let him know she might be running late. She needed to stop by the school and daycare to tell them it was fine for me to pick up the kids if needed. Also, she had to change her address. When I called Joe, he asked if I was serious about Carmen. He didn't want her to get hurt. Being in his 60s and married for over 40 years, I sensed he looked out for Carmen. His wife worked at the restaurant, so I knew he genuinely cared about her welfare. I assured him I would never hurt Carmen or the kids. I just wanted to help them, and I had strong feelings for all of them. That evening, we went back to her old apartment to gather the few things she needed. She returned her keys and let the office know she had moved out, mentioning her rent was paid for the month. Since her apartment had been broken into, she didn't need to give any notice. Mike and Mark rode back with me in the truck, while Carmen and Molly took her old car. When we got back to the house, the phone was ringing. Carmen answered. It was Mandy. Mandy wanted to know why Carmen was at our house, and Carmen explained everything, including how her apartment had been broken into and how she and the kids were almost without a home until I offered them a place to stay. Mandy then asked to talk to me. Dad, are you sure about this? You do know she cares for you, right? What else should I have done, Mandy? Just give her some money and say good luck? I truly care for her. We are adults and haven't done anything wrong. It feels nice having her and the kids here like old times. I'm just saying, Dad. This is a delicate situation. I like Carmen like a sister. Just be cautious and aware of what you're both doing. Can I talk to Carmen again? They chatted for about 20 minutes while the boys and I brought in the rest of their things and stored them in the basement. What did she want after I gave you the phone back? I asked. Mostly girl talk, but she's worried about us. Worried about what? Come on, we're adults. I'm over 50. I can manage my own life. Dan, she knows how much I care about you. I told her that, and now you know too. I explained that I'm not sure where this is going, but you've helped me and the kids a lot. I'm really thankful for that, but it's more than just gratitude now. Mandy's concerned that one of us might get hurt in this relationship. I assured her I wouldn't come between you and your family. Okay, let's just take things one day at a time. Maybe that's the best way. Just then, Mike and Mark came in. Uncle Dan, can we go in the hot tub? I looked at Carmen and then back at the kids. Only if your mother joins you. I don't want you guys going in alone. Come on, Mom, please. It'll be fun and warm with lots of bubbles, they pleaded. All right, boys, I'll go in for a little while. Go get your swimsuits on. Molly, you too, and I'll be right there. She turned to me. You set me up for this, didn't you? I just smiled, and she smiled back. She went to change. Happy now? She asked as she walked by. Very. You look wonderful, I replied. Stop it, she laughed as she headed to the hot tub. The kids were already waiting for her. Wow, she's really something, I thought as she got in. She seems to have it all. After a few minutes, I took a drink out to Carmen. She smiled and said, This water feels great. My body needed this. The kids were enjoying the bubbles. Thanks, Uncle Dan. This is awesome, said Mike. I glanced back at Carmen and then went to the office to catch up on some work. I knew the kids would be getting ready for bed soon. Sure enough, Molly peeked into my office a few minutes later. She smiled and waited for me to invite her in. No one could resist that cute little face. Molly came in, climbed on my lap, and gave me a quick hug. "Good night, Uncle Dan. See you in the morning." As I mentioned, I ran a small gas station and grocery store. I didn't fix cars anymore, but I still had a tow truck on site for occasional use. I got a call from Carmen saying her old car wouldn't start again. Frustrated with the old car, I took the tow truck and drove to the diner to pick up Carmen. There were two guys there offering to help her with her battery, clearly eager to impress her. She later told me that she had declined their help because I was coming to assist her. When I arrived in the tow truck, the two guys stepped back. I looked at Carmen and said, "Thanks for waiting, but I can take it from here." They appeared a bit flustered and left quickly. I hooked up her old car, and she climbed into the truck. Since the truck was tall, I noticed her adjusting her dress as she got in. "Thank you for coming, Dan," she said. "I told you I'll always be there for you, and I meant it." "Are you upset that someone else offered to help me?" "Not really. I just want everyone to see how great you are, but it does bother me when others show interest." "I didn't do anything wrong, Dan." "I know that. I was just answering your question. Besides, I don't own you." "You said I was your fiancé. Why did you say that?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I drove us to the junkyard. "What are we doing here, Dan?" she asked. "Getting some money for this old car. You've had enough trouble with it. Gather your personal items and put them in this bag. We can sort through it later." "What am I supposed to drive, then?" "We'll talk about it later. We need to hurry to pick up the kids." She gathered her personal papers, some shoes, and toys from the truck. We signed over her car title and secured $300 for it. We detached Molly's car seat and drove home. I opened the garage door and told Carmen she could drive my old car. It was 4 years old with only 8,000 miles on it. I had purchased it with the insurance money after Annie's accident. I usually drove the truck, so the car had not been used much. I only took it out when I brought Carmen and the kids somewhere. She put Molly's car seat in the car and went to pick up the kids. When they returned, Mark told me they had a new car. It was nicer than their mom's old one. "Dan, I'll pay you for the car." "How much do you want?" Carmen asked. "Just drive the car, Carmen. You need something better, and it's a good one. I'll keep the title in my name and pay the insurance so you'll save some money." "I don't want to bring this up, but what if we don't stay together? If I need to move out?" "Are you thinking of leaving?" "No, not at all. I was just worried about having a car if things change. I never meant to suggest I might leave. I'm sorry. I couldn't believe we were arguing over the car. Carmen, I promise you that you'll never be without a car. If you want me to write it down, I will. I just care about your safety in that old car. I want you here with me." To my surprise, she came closer to me in a way that felt nice. Molly looked at her brothers and said, "Mommy just showed appreciation to Uncle Dan. Kids, it was a thank you for letting us use his car." "No, kids. It is now your mother's car, not mine. She expressed her gratitude because I helped her." Carmen smiled and expressed her thanks once more. "Okay, everyone, time to get ready for dinner. Do you want me to cook, or should Mommy take us all to McDonald's in her new car?" "McDonald's!" everyone shouted. Chapter 4. Things Get Complicated. I was at the store on Friday while Carmen was at work. My kids, Brad, Janice, and Mandy, came by to see me. "Dad, we need to talk. Can we go to the house for a bit?" It felt more like a demand than a question. "Sure, go on home. I'll be there soon, just let yourselves in." I had a feeling what this was about and was prepared. I got home and found my kids sitting in the living room. "Dad, this is about Carmen and her kids," Brad said, stepping up to speak for them. "Really, Brad? You drove all this way for this talk? I can guess why. What did Carmen do to make you dislike her?" "I don't dislike her, Dad. It's just that one day you help her and the next she's living here with her kids. And I see your car is gone too. I assume you gave it to her." "I'll explain this to you, but I'm a bit disappointed in all of you. Dad, I think this woman is taking advantage of you. You miss Mom, and now you fall for someone new. She knows you need support, and now her kids are set." Mandy interrupted. "That's not fair, Brad. You may believe that, but I know Carmen better than you. She cares for Dad, and I think he cares for her too. I'm here to support both of them. Brad, if you weren't my son, I would be really upset with you. Let's talk about Carmen and what happened with her house being broken into. What do you think I should have done? Ignore her? I did what I believed was right in my heart, not just out of loneliness." Janice spoke up. Dad, are you saying you've never had feelings, Janice? Carmen and I have not been close yet, but it's really nobody's business what we do. Here's the big news. I'm thinking of asking Carmen to marry me. What? Brad exclaimed. Dad, you barely know her. She has a lot going on in her life, plus 3 kids. Dad, I agree with Brad, Janice added. Carmen is a lot younger than you. Is that really okay? Look, everyone, I'm alone. All 3 of you are busy living your adult lives, or almost so, like Mandy. I found someone I care about, and both Mandy and Carmen say she cares about me too. I have a big house that I want to share with a wonderful woman and her kids. Why is that a problem? Brad replied. All right, Dad, let's assume you two have a deep connection, but think about her kids. Do you really want to start over taking care of 3 little ones? I actually really care for those kids. Playing with the boys reminds me of the joy we had growing up, Brad. And Molly loves to show her affection just like my daughters did when they were little. They are wonderful kids, and I think I could really support them. Dad, you're not seeing the whole picture. They're not your kids. They aren't related to you like we are. Do you really believe you could take care of them for the next 20 years? I just can't see you wanting that. What do you think, Janice? Do they need to be related to me? I don't know, Dad. I love you, and you will always be my father. But can you really raise kids that don't belong to you? I honestly don't know. Janice, let me put it this way. Would you still have loved me if I wasn't your dad? If you could think for yourself, would you still see me as your father? You are my dad, and that's an odd question. I can't say how I would feel. Since you supported me and raised me, I see you as my real father. But I don't know how that connects to you raising Carmen's kids. I'll be right back. I need to show you something. I went to find the DNA test results. When I returned, I tried to explain it to them. Your mother and I kept some things from you. We weren't going to share this information, but things have gotten complicated regarding Carmen's kids. I really care about them, and I think I could be a good father. Here's why. I handed them copies of the DNA tests. What is this, Dad? Janice asked. These are the results for you and Brad. It shows that you two are brother and sister. That means you both have the same biological parents. Here are Mandy's results. And as you can see, not all the boxes are checked. This likely means that only one of her parents is also your parent. Mandy started to cry. Are you saying you're not my real father? No, Mandy, look at my DNA. I'm not Brad or Janice's real father. Everyone was stunned in silence, trying to understand what they had just heard. What? Brad shouted. This isn't true. You've always been my dad. Janice was emotional. Is that why you asked me about my dad, Dad? I can answer that now. You are my dad. I don't care what some test says. You will always be my father, and I love you so much. I just wanted to make sure you weren't making a mistake with Carmen. I'm so confused, Daddy. I just want you to be happy. I thought I was looking out for you. She kept crying, and I held her close. Mandy hugged her too, comforting her because they were sisters. Brad then asked, Are you going to tell us about our biological father and when you found out the truth? First, Brad, I want you and Janice to know that I have always thought of you as my kids. Ever since I found out, nothing has changed, other than you two knowing. You will always be my son, and Janice will always be my daughter. I'm sharing this because I want you to understand that it's not just blood that makes a family, but also love and care. I plan to tell them about their biological father, wanting to shift the focus to how deeply I loved them as my own, and how I wished for them to believe I had always cared for them. The troubles with their mother were in the past, and I didn't want them to know we were struggling. Your mother and I were married when we were very young. A man named Harvey also loved your mother. He had another commitment, but found joy in different aspects of life. I was thankful to have your mother to myself and asked her to marry me. We got married, and I was really happy. A few years later, your mother mentioned that part of her choice to marry me was to bring a sense of closure to a period in her life. The 4 of us stayed friends for a time, and then your mother became pregnant with you, Brad. 2 years later, Janice was born. Not long after Janice arrived, Harvey passed away, and your mom became very sad. One day, she told me that you two were actually Harvey's children. I was shocked and didn't know what to think. We took some time apart for about a month to figure everything out. I missed my little children, and after talking with your mother, we decided to give our family another try. After that, she truly became the wonderful partner I had always wished for, and I loved you kids as my own. Then Mandy was born, and your mom assured me she was definitely mine. That was our life, and the rest you all know. We had a happy family until your mom's accident. Dad, why did you check if I could get a kidney from you if you aren't my real dad? Hope, Brad. I hoped that I was a match for you. You are my son, and I would have helped you if I could. Janice asked. Dad, were you ever tested for a match before Brad got sick? No, it was quite costly back then, and I had no reason to do it. Since your mom told me the truth already, I wasn't surprised when I got tested. I have the test results for your family. Brad, you and Gail are the biological parents of your kids. Janice, you and Rob are the parents too. You don't have to share this with anyone. Your mother was a wonderful mom and wife. Let's remember it that way. I'm sorry, Dad. I acted thoughtlessly. I was probably more concerned about how this affects us, and not about you and Carmen. My son started to cry, and I hadn't seen him so upset since his mother's funeral. Brad, I understand that in situations like this, people often worry about their inheritance. It happens, but I hope you care for Carmen and her children too. I could see that reality hit when Brad and Janice looked down. I want you all to know that you will always be in my will. Each of you will get a fair share, but I am disappointed that you seem to lack concern for Carmen and her kids. Janice was still crying. The thought of not being my daughter seemed to bother her more than any inheritance. She kept hugging me and said she didn't believe the test and that I was her dad no matter what. I held her close. I was about to embrace Mandy when Carmen arrived. Well, everyone, it looks like we're going out for dinner unless you want to share why you're all here, I said. Carmen walked in. Hi, everybody, what's going on? Mandy thought quickly. This is my last weekend home, and we all decided to celebrate with dinner. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Give me a moment to change out of my work clothes. Kids, chat with Mandy, Janice, and Brad while I get ready. Molly walked over to Brad and hugged him. Hi, Brad, I like you. Brad looked at me, starting to understand a bit of what I had said. Mike approached Janice and asked, Did you bring your kids so we can all play? We're trying to share our toys better. Janice replied, No, honey, they're at home. Maybe you can come visit after Christmas. Can we, Uncle Dan, please? I've never been to their house. We'll see, Mike. It's still a couple of weeks away, I answered. Mandy asked Mark what was new. We got a new car, and Mommy thanked Uncle Dan for letting us use it. Everyone looked at me. Then Carmen stepped in to help. I did, Mike. I expressed my gratitude for him letting us use the car. We're going to use it right now to go to dinner. Come on, kids, back in the car. Uncle Dan will drive, so you all need to get in the back. After dinner, Brad came over for a private chat. I'm really sorry, Dad. I shouldn't have doubted you. You were right to ask questions, Brad. It's all about how you ask them. I want you to speak up if something concerns you. We can discuss it together until we understand each other. He smiled when I said, together. Later, I had a similar discussion with Janice. I wanted my kids to always feel supported by me. Even now, I wonder if I made the right choice by talking openly with them, but it was done. Mandy asked if I could watch the kids while she went Christmas shopping with Carmen. I asked if they could pick up a few things for me, too. I gave them a list and some money to cover it. I told them they could put the items away for me to pick up later. I wanted to buy the kids bicycles, knowing they lived in a great place to ride. I pulled Carmen aside. Do you need any money for shopping? No, I'm just buying things for the kids and you for Christmas. I got some extra cash when my friend sold my old car. I knew she was too proud to accept more money. She wanted the kids to have nice gifts without going overboard. I asked Carmen if I could use her car for shopping, and she laughed. Just be careful with it, okay? No eating in it, I just got it a few days ago, she said with a smile. I planned to take the kids to see Santa and get their pictures taken. I told them we were shopping for Mommy for Christmas, and they could choose a gift for her. Uncle Dan, said Mark. I don't have any money. I want to buy Mommy something nice. Okay, kids, here's what I'm going to do. I'll give each of you $20 to shop with. This is just for your Mommy, not for yourselves. Look for things that cost under $20. Can we carry our own money, Uncle Dan? Asked Mike. Sure, but keep it in your pocket so it doesn't get lost. Only take it out when you're ready to pay. I handed each boy a $20 bill, and they folded it and tucked it into their pockets. Molly had a little purse, and we made space for her money inside it. The kids didn't know much about money yet and were eyeing some really pricey items. Realizing it wasn't working, I decided to take them to a store that was more kid-friendly. They took the kids around to show them what they could buy with their money. I told the clerk to let me know if anything they wanted cost a bit more than they had. I was amazed at how hard the kids tried to find the perfect gift for their mom. Mike, the oldest, came up to me and asked if he could borrow $5. Uncle Dan, Mom loves unicorns, and that one costs $25. Could you help me with the extra? Sure, Mike, but it's a loan, so you'll need to pay me back. How about this? I'll give you the extra money if you wash my truck. Does that sound good? Thanks, Uncle Dan, he said, excitedly running back to buy the unicorn. Meanwhile, Mark was looking at movies. I walked over and said, Mark, you're supposed to be shopping for your mom. I am, Uncle Dan. Mom likes Titanic, the story about a boat. She also enjoys Shrek. It makes her laugh. I don't have enough for both, though. Why don't you get both? Here's some extra money, but you'll need to help Mike wash my truck when you're done. Thanks, Uncle Dan. Mom will love these. I then noticed the woman trying to help Molly, who was shaking her head. What's wrong, Molly? Can't you find what you want? None of these smell like Mommy. I want the one that smells like her. I looked at the saleswoman and whispered, White diamonds. She replied quietly, Sir, she only has $20, and white diamonds costs $50. Tell her we have a special deal. She can have it for $20 and I'll cover the rest. Molly, the saleslady said, I have this bottle of perfume. Does it smell like your mommy? That's it. It smells like Mommy. Do I have enough money? Molly asked. You are in luck. That's our last bottle, and it's just $20. Molly beamed as she took her money out of her little purse. We collected our purchases and went over to see Santa. I held all the gifts while the kids chatted and took pictures with him. After that, I asked if they wanted to help me find a gift for Mandy. She was leaving for England, and I wanted to buy her some new luggage, having already paid for her trip as a Christmas gift. The kids were eager to help, and I pretended I really needed their assistance. We headed over to the luggage section, waiting for one of the boys to spot it. Over here, Uncle Dan. Suitcases are this way. Thanks, boys. I need a set with 5 pieces. The boys calculated and looked around until they found some with 5 pieces of luggage. I want to help too, Uncle Dan. What can I do? Molly asked eagerly. Honey, you can choose the color for Mandy. Pick one you think she would like. Molly went to a set that was bright pink. The boys reminded her, though, it had to have 5 pieces, and that pink one only had 3. Molly kept looking and found a dark blue one that had 5 pieces, so we decided to buy it. Thankfully, the pink set only had 3 pieces. After that, we stopped at a burger place for lunch and then headed home. Once we were inside, the kids asked where they could hide their mom's gifts. They handed them to me to put in the office. I told them to place Mandy's luggage on her bed so she would see it when she got home. We also picked out a Christmas card for Mandy, and the kids all signed it, including Molly. I explained to them that the gift was from them. When the girls returned, the boys told Mandy to go to her room. Of course, she noticed the luggage and the card from the kids. They were all smiling at her. She hugged each of them and thanked them for the lovely present. The next couple of weeks went by quickly. Between work and the kids being in school, we were always busy. We got a Christmas tree and decorated it. It was the first tree I had in 3 years, and having the kids around made the holiday season special. Mandy had gone to England, and we told Janice and Brad we would visit them on December 26th, the day after Christmas. Preparing for Christmas was busy, but our evenings were wonderful. All 5 of us sat together in the living room every night to watch Christmas shows. I realized this was how I wanted things to be. I shopped for Carmen and got her a gift certificate from a women's store, hoping she could choose what she wanted. I also visited a jewelry store and bought her a wedding ring. I got her a beautiful red satin nightgown as well. These were my special gifts for her. When Christmas morning arrived, the kids were so excited. The boys rushed down, saying Santa had come, and there were all sorts of presents under the tree. I told them to check their stockings while I made some coffee. It was lovely to see the kids' joy that morning. What made it even better was the happiness on Carmen's face each time one of the kids opened a present. Carmen opened her gifts from the kids, and she was thrilled. She got her favorite movies from Mark, a unicorn from Mike, and perfume from Molly. Molly said, "Mommy, that was the last bottle and I had just enough money." Carmen noticed the price tag and smiled at me. I received some nice gifts from Carmen. I didn't expect anything, but what she chose was really thoughtful. She mentioned that Mandy had helped her figure out what I liked. I had 3 cards hidden in the tree, 1 for each kid. I hid bicycles somewhere in the house, and they were told where to find them. I've never seen 3 kids so happy to get their first bikes. Molly even had a bike, but we started her off with training wheels. We got some for Mark too, but we knew he wouldn't use them since his big brother didn't. While the kids were playing with their toys, I gave Carmen a big box that held a beautiful nightgown. "Wow, this is really nice. Why did you buy this?" Carmen asked. I handed her a small package. "It goes with this." When she opened it and saw the ring, she started crying. I then asked her to marry me. She was still crying and hugged me. "Why, Dan, why?" "Because I love you, and these last 2 months have meant so much to me. I want you and the kids to always be with me. So is your answer yes?" "Dan, I have to say no for now. Please let me explain. I love you with all my heart, but I can't say yes just yet." "I don't understand. Is it because of my age?" "Dan, please let me finish. No, it's not your age. It's just that we've only known each other for a couple of months. They have been wonderful months, but we still need time. You came to help a family in need, and you've done so much for us. After the holidays, things will get back to normal. I have a suggestion for you." "Okay, I'm listening." "I want to rent our rooms. I can give you $200 a week to help with expenses. I'd give you more if you needed it. I want us to be a family and live together. If, after 6 months, you don't think it's working out, just let me know, and we can make other plans. I want you to be sure. It takes time to get used to having a woman and 3 kids in your home. I want to contribute and show your family that I'm serious and not just looking for your money. I really love you, and I just need time. I won't leave unless you want me to." She handed the ring back and smiled gently. She asked if she could keep the nightgown. I think I understood her message. We shouldn't rush into marriage. We should both be sure it's what we truly want. I could accept that, but I was still hoping we could grow closer in our relationship. Our day was busy with the kids enjoying their toys. It was chilly outside, but since there was no snow, the kids wanted to ride their bikes. Carmen and I both put on our coats and watched them ride their new bikes. Later, we received a call from England. It was Mandy. She told us that Ross had proposed to her, and she said yes. He asked her in front of Big Ben, the famous clock. We were so happy for her and wished each other a Merry Christmas. In the evening, we watched the movie A Christmas Story together, and then the kids went off to bed. It felt intense, and before long, I couldn't think straight. We shared a few more moments like that during the night. When I woke up, she wasn't beside me. I got up and peeked into her room and saw her and Molly sleeping soundly. I headed to the kitchen to brew some coffee. Once everyone was awake, we had breakfast and got ready to visit Janice and her family. We were all set for our big Christmas dinner the next day. Brad and his family were there too. We exchanged gifts, and I was surprised when they had presents for Carmen and the kids. Carmen had gifts for Brad and Janice's children as well. Mandy mentioned that we usually buy for the kids, not the adults, but Brad explained that Gail thought a sweater would look nice on Carmen. Everyone shared stories about Christmas and the gifts they received. Mandy called to tell them about her upcoming wedding. Brad glanced at me, curious if I had asked Carmen to marry me. Later, he approached and apologized again for what happened a few weeks ago. "Dad, did you propose to Carmen?" "Actually, I did. She said not yet." "What? I can't believe it. I really thought she liked you. What happened?" "She needs more time. She has 3 kids, and she wants to be sure it's the right step for both of us. She wants to help out with expenses, not just accept support. She wants a loving relationship, so we agreed to take our time." "Wow, Dad. I've never met anyone like her. I know I've said a lot before, but don't let her go. She's special." "Yeah, son, we're just going to take things slow." Chapter 5. Moving forward, life continued, and we became a family. Carmen and I took turns cooking meals. We opened a shared checking account where I contributed $400 each week, and Carmen added $200. We used that money to pay the bills and buy groceries, planning together for any big purchases. So far, we didn't have any pressing needs. I often stopped at Joe's for lunch and enjoyed the times Carmen could join me for a few minutes. We felt like a married couple, We got along well and enjoyed our time together. I remember our first time in the hot tub, and I was grateful for the good filter. Being together like that felt wonderful, especially because my feelings for her made everything more special. We did have to be discreet when Mandy was home on weekends, so we would ask her to watch the kids while we stepped out. We suspected she might have caught on, but she never mentioned it. Time flew by, and soon it was almost time for Mandy's wedding. Mandy asked Carmen to be her maid of honor, and Carmen was so touched that it brought tears to her eyes. She felt lucky to have such close friends and family. Mandy wanted Molly to be her flower girl, but she decided it would be nice to ask one of her nieces instead. The days leading up to the wedding were busy. Mandy had just finished college, and we were organizing the wedding while my girlfriend was busy as the maid of honor. Luckily, the weather warmed up, and I could open the pool. While Mandy and Carmen were busy with wedding plans, the kids and I enjoyed the pool. It kept them entertained, and all I needed to do was keep an eye on them. As the wedding day approached, I thought more about Carmen and our future. I cared deeply for the kids and knew they felt the same way about me. I wanted to surprise Carmen during the ceremony. I needed to ask a few favors, but I believed it would all work out. Carmen and I hadn't discussed marriage since Christmas. On the day of Mandy's wedding, I put on my tuxedo. Brad and Rob were part of the wedding party, and so were Janice and Gail. Everyone looked nice, and the ceremony was about to start. Carmen was busy with her responsibilities, but I talked to her kids, inviting them to sit with me in the front row. Mike, Mark, and Molly came up, with Molly sitting right next to me. I reminded them to be quiet and watch the event. I would have to walk Mandy down the aisle, and I hoped they would behave. The whole family was gathered, all excited for the day. When the music began, Ross, Brad, and Rob stood with the minister at the front. Janice was the first to walk down the aisle. The kids waved and greeted her softly. Gail followed, and they waved again, always cheering for their mom. When Carmen came down, the kids exclaimed, "Hi, Mommy, you look pretty." This time they were a little louder. Carmen smiled, but gently reminded them to be quiet. Next were the flower girl and ring bearer, who were Janice and Rob's kids, and the kids waved happily at them, too. Everyone was filled with joy. The music shifted, and then Mandy appeared on my arm. Tears of happiness filled our eyes as we walked to the front of the church. I heard Molly cheerfully say, "Wow, Aunt Mandy looks like a princess." A few people laughed, and I noticed Mandy smiling brightly. It's hard to beat a compliment like that. I backed up and sat down, looking around at my family. There was my daughter Janice, my daughter-in-law Gail, who I loved like my own, and then my wonderful girlfriend. I watched my daughter prepare for this important moment with her soon-to-be husband, while my son Brad and son-in-law Rob stood proudly by my side. My two grandchildren were part of a special day, one as the ring bearer and the other as the flower girl. The other two grandchildren sat with their other grandparents. I felt very grateful. I had a wonderful family around me, and I loved every single one of them. At the reception, all the kids played together while the adults watched over them. We enjoyed dinner, and then it was time to dance. I looked up and saw Carmen coming to dance with me. "I love you, Carmen." "I love you too, Dan," she replied. "Do you really mean it, Carmen?" "I truly mean it," she said, and she shared a tender moment with me in front of everyone. This was a bit different for us since we usually kept our kisses private. The evening continued, and it was time for the bouquet toss. All the single women gathered, and Brad encouraged Carmen to join them since she was single. She felt a bit shy, but went out anyway. On the count of 3, Mandy threw the bouquet right to Carmen. The other girls laughed playfully. After that, Mandy sat down, and Ross playfully lifted her garter. The guys cheered as they saw a bit of Mandy's dress. Then the single men were meant to go out and catch the garter, which, of course, would be given to the girl who caught the bouquet, Carmen. I joined the other men, and Ross looked at me. "Sorry, guys, this is for my father-in-law," he said, handing me the garter. Everyone wondered what was happening, including Carmen. She was asked to sit down while I slid the garter on her leg. I knelt down, and when I reached her thigh, I paused and took out a wedding ring from my pocket. "Carmen, I've waited for 6 extra months. In front of all our family and friends, I ask you, will you marry me?" The room went quiet as everyone waited for her answer. Then little Molly stepped forward, looked at her mom with tears in her eyes, and said, Say yes, Mommy. Dan, I love you so much. I'll do everything I can to make you happy. Yes, I'll marry you, Carmen replied. Everyone cheered, and Mandy ran to Carmen, and they both started to cry. There wasn't a dry eye in the room, including mine, as I stepped forward to embrace my future wife. Now we are happily married. Carmen doesn't work at Joe's Diner anymore. She helps run the gas station store. Everyone likes her, and they say it's nice to work in such a family-friendly place. We're thinking about whether I should adopt the kids. I told Carmen I wanted to, and she said to wait a little while. Molly already calls me Dad, and the boys switch between calling me Dad and Uncle Dan, probably to tease their new friends. I think about my life and wonder how things might have changed for my family if I had known about Harvey Kittle long ago. I often think about what might have happened to my family if Annie had not passed away in that accident. Life can be very delicate. A single choice made early on can change everything. It's something to consider. Right now, I'm relaxing on the couch with my new wife. We're close together while my new family plays on the floor, and we enjoy watching TV. Tonight, we're going to see a classic movie. Mark gave his mom Titanic for Christmas, and we're all going to watch it together. Everyone will be there except for Molly. She'll likely fall asleep halfway through the film. Hey, audience! If you like this video and want to keep up with more thrilling stories, make sure to subscribe to Prince Cheating Tales and hit the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on our upcoming adventures. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next wonderful story.